Chapter 1. I'm Just a Scientist. 2023-08-20. Gowli was 18, though not a student. His soul had been transplanted into this life 18 years ago, and it took him more than a decade just to recover the memories of his previous existence. When they finally returned, he realized he hadn't been reborn into some ordinary world. He was in the Marvel universe. He hadn't watched many Marvel films in his first life, but the franchise was so ubiquitous, he still knew the legends and the scale of things here. Global crises were practically routine, crime levels were catastrophic, and universe-ending events and timeline resets happened with alarming regularity. He needed protection, and fast. Luckily, he had a system, the strongest tokusatsu system. The manual said any significant changes he caused in the world would be converted into rewards. After a long time of only occasionally drawing from it, there wasn't much interaction with the system besides redeeming rewards. Gowli finally learned the pattern. Most draws gave him advanced scientific knowledge from tokusatsu worlds like Kamen Rider and Ultraman. Hard, cutting-edge stuff that would baffle ordinary people, but fit him perfectly. In his previous life, he had been a small genius and a prodigious research enthusiast, praised even by his strict mentor. Sometimes, draws produced actual items, and more rarely, they granted small skills. So far, he'd gotten 2 small skills. 10-meter dash let him, after a specific incantation, designate up to 3 people who would then be forced to spend exactly 100 seconds to move 10 meters. Invincible Firehead allowed him once per day to set a single target on fire, only if that target had widespread prestige or fame. Subtle, but powerful for crowd control. His parents had died in an accident the year before, but they left him a generous inheritance. He turned their villa into a lab, quit school, and threw himself into building things with the black tech knowledge the system provided. In the dim lab, he worked obsessively, hammering and soldering, prototypes and sketches scattered everywhere. A blue-painted armor sat on a stand, nearly finished. Excellent. The matching accelerated police baton is done, he muttered, admiring the suit. The retractable electromagnetic baton was simple compared to the rest. The basic armaments were all in place. He stroked his chin. What should I name it? G3 armor? A car crashed through the villa's outer wall before he could decide. Glass and concrete exploded outward. An Audi sports car lay half in and half out of the hole. A handsome, disheveled man staggered out of the airbag, clutching his head. Gowli blinked. Stark. Tony Stark. The name alone told him this was an opportunity. Tony's genius had produced technology Gowli hadn't seen in his previous life. If he played it right, Tony shook his head, blinking the stars from his vision. Fuck, I didn't drink that much, did I? Gowli picked up his phone and began dialing the police. Hey, kid, Tony said, still half dazed. If I were you, I'd put down the phone and don't make a fuss. You could get a huge compensation check. Gowli didn't hesitate. Let's talk. How much will you give? It has to be more than what I'd get if I call the police. Tony blinked. He'd expected gratitude or a lawsuit, not this bluntness. I apologize for the accident. Fortunately, no one's hurt. I'll write you a check for $2 million. That'll buy you a new villa. Gowli redialed the police with a bored expression. $2 million? Try again. That's insultingly small. Tony's patience thinned. He had money, but he wasn't wasteful. Stark Industries has the best lawyers in New York. Sue if you want. You'll waste your time and lose. Tony tried another tack. Where are your parents? I'll talk to them. Gowli said flatly. They passed away. I live here alone. You can talk to me. That softened Tony. He was no stranger to tragic backstories, and it touched some old vein of sympathy. I'm sorry, kid. How about $3 million? Gowli calculated silently and shook his head. Not nearly enough. Tony's face fell into a frown. He'd heard echoes of his own past in the kid's situation and wanted to help, but he didn't enjoy being extorted. Listen, sometimes greed gets you nothing. I can go up to $4 million. Gowli tapped the G3 armor. Money's not the point. I'm starting a company. A lot of equipment and instruments are needed. If I can get a big settlement, I won't have to deal with the Department of Defense. Tony stopped. He wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. What did you say? Gowli's voice stayed steady. If the product I'm making is good, the Department of Defense will come find me. I won't have to beg them. Tony laughed in disbelief. This kid sounded like the jokey, overconfident amateur inventors Tony had seen before, certain they'd changed the world when they hadn't even learned the basics. Amused, Tony raised the offer. All right then, humor me. $5 million, and I want to see this masterpiece. Gao Li sighed theatrically. You really don't understand the basics. The Department of Defense doesn't buy with 5 million, they buy with capabilities. He knew he was bluffing, but the gambit worked. Tony was interested now. Half drunk and curious, the multi-billionaire playboy leaned in. The product I propose to offer them is the G3 armor, also called the G3 system, Gao Li explained. There are two versions. If the DoD is short on budget, they can buy a version primarily of conventional, high-performance aluminum alloy. If they can afford the full package, they can buy the complete G3 armor, my crowning achievement. It's made from my Valorous super-hard aluminum alloy. Valorous is the trademark I registered. Conventional aluminum alloys melt between 400 and 700 degrees Celsius. The Valorous series can withstand temperatures up to 2,000 degrees Celsius for continuous periods. Tony scoffed, so loudly Gao Li could hear it. 2,000 degrees? Aluminum doesn't even melt that high. What nonsense. Gao Li opened a drawer and produced a 12-nozzle double-head liquefied gas torch, the kind that can produce near 2,000-degree flames. Tony had the same torch brands in his own labs. He knew what it could do. Before Tony could mouth another insult, Gao Li squeezed the trigger and focused the flame on the edge of the G3 armor. The metal took the heat for over 10 seconds, then 20. Tony's smirk faded as he watched the flame lick over the armor with no sign of melting or warping. After a full minute of sustained ultra-high heat, the armor remained unchanged. Tony's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, fingers tapping the surface as if he could find the trick with touch alone. The sound of his tapping changed from mockery to incredulity. The alloy felt familiar, aluminum-like, but not any alloy Tony knew how to make. This was no ordinary trick. Okay, Tony said through a tight smile. Next, show me its ballistics. Gao Li pulled a classic Desert Eagle from the same drawer. He had obtained a legal gun license recently and handled the pistol with practiced calm. Legally purchased firearm, he said. Stand back to avoid ricochet. Tony, suddenly cautious, retreated behind the partially crushed Audi. The vehicle was a bulletproof model, as if it couldn't help but be ostentatious. Gao Li fired. Bullets struck the armor. Sparks flared, the surface pinged, but the structure held. Even the frame that supported the armor only shuddered. Tony watched with his jaw set tighter. Gao Li fired a few more rounds, each one met by the same resilience. The Desert Eagle was no fancy law enforcement sidearm. It was a magnum caliber pistol. The G3 armor shrugged it off. Tony stepped up to the suit and ran a hand over it again, this time with a practiced technician's curiosity instead of a critic's contempt. This is impossible, he said. If this is an aluminum alloy, it's unlike any aluminum I've ever seen. Gao Li smiled. It's mine. Tony looked at the boy in the ruined villa, at the indestructible blue suit on its stand, and for the first time that night, the arrogance in his voice was tinged with real interest. Section 2, Tony's eyes narrowed. This whole scene confirmed it. The G3 armor's kinetic energy buffering system was exceptional, its protective performance superior to 99% of the bulletproof vests on the market. And the power source driving this armor is a commutating micro-battlefield generator, Gao Li said, pride in his voice. It's a registered trademark. In the future, I want to make a civilian model for sale, he continued. Its performance is unmatched, and it's far more efficient than any generator of its size out there. Wait, Tony interrupted. You put a generator inside the suit? On a battlefield, that thing could get fried by an explosion, right? Gao Li chuckled. Not at all. That's why it's called a battlefield generator. It's built to be insanely safe and stable. It can survive missile-level blasts and keep working. He lifted the Desert Eagle again, clearly about to prove the point. But Tony, who'd crawled out of the car, grabbed his wrist. Okay, I believe you. No need for demonstrations. Tony didn't want to watch a generator go off in the lab and possibly hurt Gao Li. Gao Li lowered the gun and stayed calm. With a generator, you need a battery, Gao Li went on. I developed the zero-emission fuel, ZMF, non-polluting fuel cell to power it. I've checked the market. Environmental tech is huge right now, ZMF has excellent performance and is completely non-polluting. It'll qualify for multiple environmental certifications. Tony's ears perked up. Stark Industries prided itself on energy tech. An eco-friendly, high-performance battery? We already have several prototype models in the lab, he said, brushing it off. Gowley's mouth twitched. Oh, then how do you plan to handle the silver-reinforced soft polymer? With a thin coating, you can keep flexibility and still get some bullet resistance, Tony replied, stroking his chin. Like bulletproof silicone. Sounds promising. Stark Military's product line next quarter will have things like that. The veins at Gowley's temple throbbed. He suddenly lost his composure. Fine. If I have to show real stuff to beat you where you're strongest, since Stark is an energy behemoth, I will. He led Tony to the center of the lab and pointed to a vial of glowing, blood-red liquid. This is my trump card, he announced. A brand new form of energy never seen before. Photonic blood. I've even built a photonic terminal. As long as the photonic terminal is used as a coupling stabilizer, it can stabilize photonic blood's massive energy output, letting it outperform other energy sources. This will revolutionize the energy industry. Photonic blood. Now Tony was genuinely intrigued. New energy sources were orders of magnitude harder to invent than better generators or polymers. If Gowley was telling the truth, this could change everything. Do you have papers or data? Tony asked, suddenly serious. After all he'd seen, he could recognize real genius. Gowley beamed. I do. I'll publish when photonic blood is ready for commercialization, but you can read them now. He handed over a stack of papers. Tony glanced at the author line and froze. Gori Parker. He read, then read again. The theory was meticulous, the logic rigorous, the experiments well-designed. Even with Tony's most critical eye, there was nothing wrong. Wide applicability, insane energy efficiency. Tony's contempt and irritation melted into something like admiration. Here he saw an echo of his own youthful brilliance. The mutual recognition between geniuses. Tony found himself liking Gori. Gori Parker, Tony said, almost eagerly, you probably don't have the capital to start a company yet. Join Stark Industries as my assistant. I'll pay you $10 million a year. Gowley's heart leapt. Funding solved. Access to Stark's resources too. He swallowed his excitement and forced himself to be nonchalant. $10 million a year, just to be an assistant? Tony cocked his head. Yes, and a $5 million signing bonus paid in full. Gowley's expression hardened. I refuse. I refuse, he added with unexpected swagger. The thing I, Gori Parker, enjoy most is saying no to people who think they're great. Tony bristled. Weird hobby. Think carefully. This is Tony Stark offering. Underneath the bravado, Tony was thrilled. He'd never found a true intellectual peer in his life. Friends and soldiers, yes, but no one to spar ideas with. The discovery of Gori made him want to recruit the kid badly. Gori puffed up even more. Tony paused, then raised the offer. $50 million a year. Stark won't claim patent rights or authorship on anything you develop while you work with me. Everything stays yours. A beat. Gowley's posture relaxed. When do we start onboarding? Tony blinked, startled by the sudden ease. He drove Gowley in his slightly battered Audi to Stark Tower. It was the weekend. Stark Industries didn't do overtime, so the place was mostly empty. Tony expected HR to have someone on duty. They found Pepper Potts working late, as usual. She looked Gowley over and extended a hand. Hello, I'm Pepper Potts. Gori Parker, he replied, shaking her hand. Pepper hesitated and then leaned toward Tony. I won't ask why, but Tony, are you sure he's old enough to work legally? Tony fumbled. How old do you have to be to work again? Before Pepper could answer, an alarm bathed the lobby in red and a shrill siren filled the tower. Jarvis, in his calm electronic voice, cut through. Alarm. Stark Tower is under attack. What? The three of them froze. They turned to the window and saw a civilian airliner bearing down on the building. What the? Is this a 9/11 reenactment? Tony swore, aghast. Stark Tower's external defensive shutters dropped automatically, but the plane smashed through with a deafening crash. The building shuddered, and a massive section collapsed. Chapter 3. Code 555-2023-0820 boom, boom, boom. The airliner breached the tower. The iron shutters were nothing against that mass and momentum. The impact didn't directly hit the floor the trio were on, but it wrecked the structure. Fires ignited, water and power cut out, dust filled the air. Cough! Gowlee staggered to his feet through the smoke. The crash had happened so fast he barely processed it. Tony? Pepper? Both of them were coughing. Dust-coated but alive. Gowlee breathed a silent sigh of relief. For a moment his mind turned to the absurdity. He'd never actually watched Iron Man, only heard stories, so he didn't understand why Tony would be targeted before becoming a superhero. But that thought vanished. There were more immediate problems. "Where are the National Guard?" Tony muttered. "How did this happen?" Pepper was trembling. "We're okay, just scratches." Gowlee tried to be practical. "We can't wait. The streets are jammed. It will be at least half an hour for rescue." "Helicopters?" Pepper asked. Gowlee pointed up. "There's fire above. Choppers can't get close." Tony checked his phone. No signal. He looked at the flip phone in Gowlee's hand with surprise. "How do you still have one of those?" Gowlee ignored the jab and tapped the keys. He put it on speaker. 911, is this an emergency? We're under attack at Stark Tower, Manhattan." Gowlee gave a quick summary, assuming the operator would already be seeing news feeds. He hung up. "Traffic's gridlocked. Even if help's on the way, it'll be slow." Tony tried Jarvis again. No answer. Pepper swallowed. "Can we call for help?" Gowlee's flip phone buzzed as he worked more buttons. "The signal's blocked during attacks. I upgraded this to use satellite relays." Tony shook his head. "Why on a flip phone and not a smartphone?" Gowlee ignored him, focused. "I'm remotely controlling a drone at my place. I'm sending something up, my last resort, in case we need it." "A drone?" Tony asked. "But the airspace is a nightmare now. Fires, debris. You'd have to come down to receive anything." Gowlee's face was grim under the dust. "Then we go down. If the fire spreads like in 9/11, we don't have time to wait. We have to move now." Pepper stood there for a moment before asking, "So why was Stark Tower attacked? Tony, did you make some enemies?" Tony, who was rarely at a loss for words, thought for a few seconds. "I have a lot of enemies. I'm not sure which one did this." Pepper blinked. Where on earth did he get so many enemies? But thinking of Tony's usual infuriating personality made her feel oddly reassured. Gowlee frowned. "If this was a terrorist attack aimed at you, they probably have more than just airstrikes. Maybe there aren't only air raids. They could have ground teams waiting to ambush anyone who comes down. Going down blindly would be dangerous." Tony snorted. "They're coming for me. I'm not running. I'll deal with it." Gowlee cut him off. "You two stay right behind me. Being in front would slow me down. This is the safest approach right now." Tony hesitated, wanting to ask, "You're just a kid who sits in a lab. What makes you qualified to lead? And what right do you have to declare this the safest plan?" But before he could, Gowlee had already taken the lead and started down. Tony and Pepper followed, reluctantly. After more than 20 flights, they were all breathing hard. Suddenly, Tony grabbed them both and hissed, "Shh, stop!" Puzzled, Pepper and Gowlee obeyed, and Tony put a finger to his lips. Gowlee listened and heard faint, heavy footsteps from below, growing closer. "Normal people would be fleeing downward right now," Gowlee whispered. "If someone is heading up, they're most likely the attackers." Tony's face darkened. They were trapped in the stairwell. Going back up meant racing through a hallway already full of fire. Going down meant meeting terrorists. Leaving the stairwell on this floor would require opening a door in plain hearing of those below and risk being surrounded. Tony's mind raced. They had no weapons. Even if they did, hand-to-hand or improvised weapons would be useless against trained terrorists. It felt like a dead end. He looked at the two people beside him, the kid he'd brought here who wouldn't be in this mess if not for him, and Pepper, who'd been with him for years and meant more to him than he'd ever admitted. In what felt like both an eternity and a few seconds, Tony took a breath as if reaching a decision. "There's only one option," he said quietly. "One person distracts them so the others can escape. This attack is aimed at me, so you go up quietly. I'll open the door on this floor and draw them in so you can slip past and get down without a direct confrontation." Pepper covered her mouth, pushing down her panic and outrage. "Tony, no, I will not abandon you." Tony's voice was odd. "There's no time. It's not who I like to be, but it's a rational choice. First, this all started because of me. Second, sacrificing one can save two. It's the more efficient outcome. Understand?" "I don't want to owe anyone anything," Pepper snapped, "and my startup capital isn't even secure yet." Gao smiled faintly and raised the flip phone in his hand. Also, since I said it would be stable, it will be stable. Tony stared. What do you mean? You asked me earlier why I still use this old flip phone, Gao said. Then, to Tony and Pepper's bewilderment, he dialed 3 digits, 106, and hit enter. Burst mode. The flip phone let out a chirrup, a charging whine, and its edges lit up. Gao twisted the screen, and the little flip device folded into the shape of a small pistol. Tony stared. Pepper gasped. A gun? From a phone? Neither of them could imagine how such a tiny pistol would stop terrorists packed into a stairwell. But before they could comment, Gao pointed the muzzle down the stairs and pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. In burst mode, the phase phone fired 3 quick rounds. High-energy photonic bullets, converted from Gao photonic blood, punctured through several stair treads and struck the terrorists below. Screams echoed upward. Tony knew immediately it had been effective. Gao fired 4 more rapid shots. More screams followed. It's because they're bunched so tightly in the stairwell, Gao said calmly. Blind fire will hit somebody. As gunfire erupted below, opposing shots came back. The terrorists' bullets couldn't penetrate several layers of stairs to reach Gao. He tapped the keypad, 27R, and reloaded, then opened fire again. The shouts and screams gradually dwindled to near silence. Gao stopped and looked up. Either they're all down, or they've loosened up so blind firing won't hit them. What do you think, Tony? Tony glanced at the weapon, then at the stairwell below. How many bullets did this thing hold? Was it infinite? He didn't say that. Instead, he said, your high-penetration rounds are keeping them from advancing. Keep firing down there. Turn the bottom into a hornet's nest. Whatever cover they use is useless against photonic bullets. They'll get through. Gao nodded and entered another code. 103, then hit enter. Single mode. He fired more controlled shots in different directions. Concrete and reinforced structures were like paper to those rounds. There were a few more cries, then silence. All clear downstairs. Move, Gao ordered and led them down. Tony and Pepper followed close. They reached the first floor, where Tony crouched behind a pillar and whispered, You hide here. Don't move. We'll go out and scout. Pepper opened her mouth to protest, but Tony, quick as ever, imitated Gao quiet move and slipped off with him before she could say anything. Perhaps because the terrorists had just moved up, the group on the first floor hadn't noticed the commotion coming from the stairwell, which gave Gao and Tony a good window. They crept to a bearing column to peer at the scene. In the lobby, hostages, tourists, and staff were gathered in the center, kneeling with their hands over their heads like scenes from a robbery movie. Armed terrorists patrolled around them. It was only a matter of time before their position was discovered. What now? Tony mouthed. Wait for the drone, Gao replied. Tony furrowed his brow. How much could a drone carry? Not heavy weapons. What would a drone possibly do? As if on cue, a quadcopter hovered at a nearby window with a briefcase suspended beneath it. The obvious delivery drew the terrorists' attention. As they moved to intercept, Gao suddenly sprang into action. Cover the drone, he shouted, and opened fire. Terrorists returned fire, and shards of glass rained in. Gao tossed the phase phone to Tony and clapped his hands toward the drone. The small AI-guided craft veered in, only to be hit and crash. The briefcase slid across the floor, though, and Gao caught it. Phew. Thankfully, it made it, he breathed, as the enormous pressure of the last few minutes eased. He quickly punched in the briefcase's password and flipped it open. Inside were a bottle of something, a flashlight, a camera, and a belt. Tony, still covering with the phone gun in his hands, fired a few more shots toward the terrorists and called out, incredulous, "What is this?" Gao didn't answer with a straight face. He unscrewed the bottle labeled Transformation One Shot and downed it. Tony barked, "Are you kidding me? Now's the time to drink a beverage?" Gao wiped his mouth and grinned. "You don't get it? I can't use the belt without this. Otherwise, who'd drink something that awful? Next time I'll make it fruit-flavored." He snapped the belt open and began setting it up. Tony kept up suppressive fire while glaring at him. Normally, the Kamen Rider phase driver can't be used by ordinary humans. It's designed for Orphnoks or humans who carry the Orphnok mark. But a scientist named Nomura had developed a drug, Transformation One Shot, that temporarily allows regular humans to use the driver. Gao Li was about to prove it. Section 4 originally, Nomura had believed the side effect of the transformation one-shot drug was that whoever used a Kamen Rider belt might pay with their life. In reality, the drug sacrificed the Kaisha driver itself, a fact that showed how incomplete his understanding had been. After Gao Li obtained the formula and researched it thoroughly, he finally grasped its principle. It worked like an Orfnock mark, temporarily tricking the driver system. The burden of transforming without an Orfnock factor would be transferred entirely to the driver, which would then reach the end of its life after a single use. If the transfer failed, the user would be the one to die, unable to withstand the strain once the transformation ended. Gao Li reworked the formula, engineering it so the burden and the lethal stress were guaranteed to be taken up 100% by the driver, sparing the user from the probabilistic death it once caused. "Fai's driver, hold on," he muttered as he finished the final adjustments. After attaching both the Fai's flashlight and the Fai's camera, he buckled the belt around his waist. With a precise click, the Kamen Rider Fai's belt locked into place. "Give me the phone." Tony tossed the phone to him. Gao Li caught it and flipped the cover open, typing numbers with easy confidence. 555. Enter. Standing by. A soft standby tone began. Gao Li took a breath and slid the phone into the belt. Transform. Crimson photonic blood poured from the driver like living, blood-colored filaments suspended in the air. They streamed over Gao Li's body as if painting him in light. Complete. The mechanical chorus of servos and circuitry rose with dazzling illumination. Tony instinctively raised an arm to shield his eyes. Pepper, crouched in the stairwell, did the same. The brilliance lasted only seconds. When it faded, Gao Li's ordinary form was gone. In his place stood a masked warrior in full two-tone armor, red trim over a silver base, face hidden completely beneath the helmet. "Gao Li, you are." Even the usually arrogant Tony found his eyes widen, crowded with questions. How did the armor materialize? Nanoparticles? Space compression? Some form of instant deployment? Gao Li answered only the most basic question. "Kamen Rider Phase. This is Kamen Rider Phase." "Kamen Rider Phase?" Tony echoed, tasting the words. "Is that photonic blood extending from the belt? Is this a military application of photonic blood?" "I can't compare its data to the G3 system yet," Gao Li replied, "but its portability definitely surpasses the G3 armor." While Tony considered the implications, Gao Li stretched his neck, rolled his shoulders, and grinned like a showman. "Now for the highlight." He surged forward like a lone rider. Terrorists opened fire, but their bullets merely sparked off the armor and failed to slow him. Gao Li's speed, 5.8 seconds per 100 meters, let him close the distance in an instant. He struck with 2 decisive punches. 2 men screamed as a force of nearly 2.5 tons sent them flying like rag dolls. Civilians nearby seemed to move in slow motion, unable to dodge, block, or counter. In the span of a heartbeat, another 3 or 4 attackers were sent sprawling. Their weapons did nothing. The terrorists watched, stunned. Where had this killing machine come from? Firearms were useless. Gao Li flipped with superhuman grace, landed, then kicked the lead terrorist aside. He grabbed the man and spun him like a human windmill, sending 5 more enemies tumbling. He's flexible despite wearing armor, and it's incredibly bulletproof. The power system is off the charts. Tony, as a military industrialist, inhaled sharply. He knew battlefield data well enough to know how destructive such a system would be. Captain America had relied on a shield for protection during World War II. Now Gao Li was effectively a bulletproof Captain America, a single man too dangerous to face in individual combat. Armies would have to respond with saturation fire and heavy ordnance, if they could at all. "This is my first time testing phase in combat," Gao Li said, a grin clear in his voice. The suit's sensors, Ultimate Finder, Extreme Nose, and Pinfall Sonar, fed him enhanced perception. The smart PC-4 in the phase phone, a compact but powerful 4th-generation microcomputer, analyzed the fight and provided instant feedback. Gao Li had a clear, immediate picture of the battlefield. He paused, suddenly removing the camera Tony had been curious about. 2 clicks, and the camera snapped into a gauntlet form on his arm. He extracted a chip from the phone case, slotted it into the gauntlet, and a calm "ready" sounded. Tony frowned. This kid was making weapons look like everyday gadgets. Assassination made convenient, he thought, and felt a twinge of embarrassment. Gao Li flipped the phone on his belt open and pressed enter. The belt hummed as photonic blood flowed again. Exceed charge. Energy surged from the waist down the arm and pooled in the gauntlet. A warning tone rose sharply. Gao Li sprinted toward the terrorist's armored vehicle. Take this! Gran impact. The gauntleted strike detonated with a roar and white flare. The heavy vehicle flipped and rolled like a toy, crushing and scattering terrorists in its path. When it came to a halt, the machine split and a blood-red fife appeared in the air before the vehicle detonated completely. Has modern technology advanced this far? Remarkable. He regarded Gao Li with a measure of respect. I am Shu Wenwu, leader of the 10 Rings. I have other titles as well. Young man, who are you? Wenwu's surprise had reason. The 10 Rings were versatile and powerful. Used as they had just been, they could match the impact of a tank cannon. Historically, they'd been able to collapse gates and walls, in effect, missile-level destructive power. Fai's defenses had spared Gao Li a mortal blow, but the hit had hurt. Gao Li considered, and then offered a string of self-descriptions that left Wenwu and Tony dumbfounded. The man with a burning heart for revenge, the one who protects promises with his life, the cold-blooded robotic cow killer, the man who defends the bond between children and their mothers, the veteran monster hunter, the one who bleeds for love. None of those titles seemed to fit. Gao Li shook his head. Never mind. None of those are quite right. Call me a passing Kamen Rider. In fact, I'm just passing by Stark Tower. Wenwu frowned. So this Kamen Rider was a bystander dragged into the conflict. The 10 Rings operations sometimes impacted civilians, but stumbling into such a powerful adversary was bad luck indeed. Kamen Rider was an unfamiliar name, but his strength matched nothing Wenwu had encountered before. Though Wenwu had centuries of experience and kept a close eye on modern science and technology, this was a new variable on the field, and one that would change how he judged the fight. Section 5. Kamen Rider? That's a first, Wenwu said. Is there any way to end this peacefully? Withdraw from this fight, and our 10 Rings will only take Tony Stark. I will personally thank you later. Gao Li glanced at his phone, then shook his head. No, I was passing Stark Industries. Yes, but I was here to finish my onboarding at Stark Tower. I'm the most merciful rider there is, Gao Li continued. I've seen what terrorists do. I won't let them live. Wenwu's face darkened. Ungrateful. They moved at the same time. Energy flared around them. Red and blue attacks clashed. Under the protection of the 10 Rings, Wenwu was virtually untouchable. Still, the remaining terrorists were wiped out in the exchange. Realizing that, Wenwu's expression grew harder. He forced the 10 Rings off his arms and used the recoil to charge straight at Gao Li. Gao Li snorted. Someone actually wanted to trade bare-handed blows with a rider? He'd seen enough fight scenes to know how dangerous that was. In less than 30 seconds of close combat, Gao Li was embarrassingly sent flying. He rolled to his feet, mouth tasting of blood, and stared at the 10 Rings on Wenwu's arms. The rings amplified Wenwu to near platinum form, A-rank strength and defense, on par with a typical Kamen Rider. In close quarters, Wenwu's skill utterly dominated Gao Li. Surrender, Wenwu said. You don't stand a chance. Wenwu had calmed. He'd felt it when they clashed. This rider was inexperienced. No real pressure. His thoughts drifted to the phase system strapped to Gao Li. If the 10 Rings could capture that technology, their power would increase dramatically. Gao Li laughed. Question time. Before I said that, I checked my phone. Guess what I was looking at? Wenwu paused. Before he could answer, an unmanned motorcycle burst through the doorway. Distracted by Gao Li's question, Wenwu could only half raise his defense and was blasted aside by the 450 horsepower impact. He landed like a cannonball in the corner, spitting blood. The motorcycle was intact. It slid to a stop beside Gao Li with a neat tail whip. You're touchy today. Traffic must have been rough, Otto Vajin, Gao Li said, patting the bike. Otto Vajin could run people over, but couldn't transform into a fighting mode. Gao Li's current tech couldn't create the combat form. 6 or 7 bones broken, no doubt, Wenwu growled, forcing himself up and waving away the dust. Gao Li pulled the Fai's edge from Otto Vajin. A blood-red energy blade extended like a lightsaber. Close combat isn't in my favor. I'll end this fast. He loaded a chip, pressed the button, and straddled Autovagin. Ready. Exceed charge. Wenwu's pupils narrowed. Gao Li's mobility surged on the bike. In an instant, he was on Wenwu, slashing down. The red blade met the rapidly spinning 10 rings. Red and blue energies soared, locked in a fierce stalemate. The building trembled. Wenwu stepped back, then 2 steps 3, until his back hit the wall. Autovagin's power magnified the red blade slash. Even the 10 rings strained to hold. It's gonna break through, Wenwu snarled. He fought desperately, swinging the 10 rings with everything he had. The collision exploded midair. The blast threw Gao Li into the ceiling and slammed Wenwu against the far wall. Both coughed up blood. As Wenwu tried to recover, he caught sight of Gao Li flicking something onto his leg while still falling. What is that? Exceed charge! A flashlight on Gao Li's leg shot out a blood-red drill of energy, pinning Wenwu to the wall. In midair, Gao Li shifted his pose and dove in for a kick. Crimson smash! He slammed his foot into the spiraling red light, then vanished. When he reappeared, he had already passed through the wall and landed outside, as if he'd phased through it. Behind him, a crimson-shaped sigil appeared and detonated. The explosion pulverized the wall and Wenwu. When the smoke cleared, only 10 metal rings lay on the ground, clinking together. The 10 rings themselves were undamaged. Gao Li stared. What are these made of? Tony, who had been checking on the hostages, walked over with a complicated expression. Is he dead? As dead as the others, Gao Li said, nonchalant. He'd only won by catching a last-second weak point in the 10 rings' defense. Tony hesitated, struggling for words. I know the best psychologist in New York. I can get you an appointment, free. He didn't finish. To him, Gao Li still looked like a teenager who'd been through a nightmare. It was natural to worry about the long-term effects. Gao Li, who had lived 2 lives and carried more weight than his appearance suggested, waved it off. Don't worry. Taking out these scum won't weigh on me. Thinking about what they did, I feel they got what they deserved. He deactivated his transformation. Tony raised an eyebrow. You're awfully calm. Before Tony could say more, a scream came from across the room. Ah, my Faye's phone. Don't die. Gao Li's phone and the belt around his waist began to gray and crumble like plaster. The Fai's system couldn't withstand the forced transformation and disintegrated into ash amid Gao Li's dismayed cries. Tony watched, bewildered. Self-destruct after use? To prevent tech leakage? But the tech didn't explode or short out. It turned to ash. Tony tried to make sense of it as a single thought rose in his mind. I'm very curious. Gao Li snapped back. Right, this was the proud, brilliant inventor persona he'd meant to use to pique Tony's competitive interest. He couldn't drop it too abruptly. Straightening his expression, he said, Exactly. My work isn't to be touched by others. With this fight, the Fai's system's exposure was inevitable, so I activated the self-destruct I built into it. Tony looked skeptical. The pain on Gao Li's face moments ago hadn't seemed like the calm of a planned self-destruct, but he chose not to press it. They'd just been through a major event together. Gao Li had saved him. That carried weight. Tony already suspected Gao Li had been pushed to the edge in the fight. With all those hostages, this battle can't be kept secret, Tony said. The Department of Defense will come asking about Kamen Rider Phase. He didn't comment on Gao Li's do not touch line. Tony had been talking about selling G3 to the DoD himself. His stance on technology transfer was complicated. So what do you want to do? Whatever you decide, Stark Industries will back you, Tony said, puffing his chest. I don't like owing favors. Stark always repays kindness. Gao Li considered. What do you suggest? You've dealt with the Department of Defense more than I have. Remember, Section 6. My suggestion is no suggestion at all. Just follow your heart, Tony said proudly. With me backing you, whatever you choose, you won't have to worry about the future. It really comes down to whether you sell the Kamen Rider system to the Department of Defense, he went on. If you don't, Stark Industries will provide protection, enough to keep small-time players from trying to steal your IP or strong-arm you. And if you do sell it to the DoD, congratulations, you can realize your dream of starting a company immediately. Stark will make sure you don't get fleeced in the deal. You'd make a killing. Gao Li fell into thought. Tony was right. Selling to the Department of Defense would put him at the top overnight. But I don't want to sell it to the Department of Defense, Gowley said. If possible, I want Kamen Rider tech to protect people, not be used in wars to feed the ambitions of powerful men. Tony whistled and clapped him on the shoulder. So you're passing on the military route. Congratulations, kid. You've avoided competing with genius Tony Stark. Gowley rolled his eyes, half amused and half irritated. Tony suddenly grew serious. But listen, Kamen Rider tech is a weapon. The Department of Defense won't give up easily. Even with Stark Industries protecting you, you need to be careful. The good news is you're about to join Stark Industries, Tony said. We'll provide company housing in Stark Tower in Manhattan, totally secure. Stark Tower? Gowley blinked. Where did that come from? I've never heard of it. It's coming. Stark Tower needs renovations, and employees need a place to live. Tony called to Pepper. Pepper, find a building for sale in Manhattan. Buy the most luxurious one you can. Gowley looked speechless. What about my equipment at home? He asked. Don't worry, Tony said. We'll hire professionals to move everything and sign strict NDAs. Tony put an arm around Gowley's shoulder like an older brother. Bottom line, you don't have to worry. If a genius like me decides to protect someone, I don't do things halfway. Gowley squinted. Pepper glanced toward the shattered hall nearby. The ruins were a blunt reminder of how optimistic Tony's assurances sounded. Tony waved it off. If terrorists ever attack again, you won't even need your Lego armor. I'll update Jarvis in Stark Tower so the security system alone will take care of them. All of that had to wait until the network was restored. For now, they could only wait for rescue and endure Tony's non-stop boasting. Tony and Pepper were entertained. Gowley was less impressed. While he mouthed the polite responses, his attention was fixed on a system interface others couldn't see. On it, a giant SSS rank lottery icon flashed, an unprecedented SSS rank. Gowley's heart started pounding. He'd pulled a few draws before. Technology for 2 Kamen Riders and a couple of minor skills, S and SS rank rewards. He'd never seen anything equal to 3 S's. Could what he'd done today have affected the world? He hovered over the icon, resisting, then gave in to curiosity. The SSS symbol split into a slot machine display. Unlike a normal slot with 3 changing icons, this machine had only one icon that flickered rapidly. As it slowed, it finally stopped on a golden card. Golden Rank Advanced Experience card? Gowley read the description aloud. Transforms you into a special hero you don't possess for one battle, lasting until the battle ends. The machine dissolved into motes of light that coalesced into a phantom card. Gowley flipped it and saw a familiar Kamen Rider image on the back. His pupils tightened. This one, almost terrifyingly powerful. Chapter 9. Time. Stop. The rider on the card was black and green, wearing a skirt-like cape that signified strength. His name echoed both Cronus, the father of Zeus in Greek myth, and Kronos, the primordial god of time. He was designed to be the counter to the final boss, the game god, Kamen Rider Kronos. He possessed incredible speed, strength, and defense, but most crucially, he commanded pause, the ability to stop time, and reset, the power to rewind it. Gowley didn't know much about the Marvel Universe, but he understood this. Time stopping and time rewinding were top-tier powers anywhere. Short of owning the Time Stone or using some other advanced artifact, few beings could counter them. A heavy frustration washed over him. It was usable only once. That made it more of a life-saving trump than a repeated tool. He wanted to scream, "Time, stop," or shout, "Zawarudo," and see the world freeze. He'd already shown his talent to the world, and right now he couldn't afford to hoard too many tricks. Aside from 2 minor skills, Gowley's Kamen Rider tech inventory amounted to Kamen Rider G3 and Kamen Rider Phase. Building the Phase system had eaten half of his inheritance. With a salary from Stark Industries, he wouldn't have to worry about funds to rebuild it, but Phase was complex to manufacture and would turn to dust after one use, the same as an experience card. Mass-producing it would risk leaks of core technology. For now, I can only rely on the G3 armor, he thought, and sighed inwardly. Once rescue arrived, Tony went straight to updating the security system. Pepper had indeed found a magnificent building in Manhattan, what had once been called the Trump Hotel, and Tony had bought it without a second thought. Gowley signed the contract and officially became Tony's assistant. Stark's New York presence wasn't limited to Stark Tower. That day, Tony took Gowley to a 6-story building in Queens, one of Stark Industries' testing sites. I've updated the security system, but it still needs field testing, Tony explained. Stark Tower isn't ready yet and lacks the necessary equipment, so I'll install it in Lab Building 6 first. So I'm staying here tonight? Gowley asked, eyes lighting up. That's right, Tony said. This place handles military-industrial testing. The equipment is extensive, and there's plenty of munitions, perfect for testing my security upgrades. Gowley practically sprinted ahead. Where's the lab? Lead the way, Tony beamed. He loved people who understood late-night lab obsession. Half an hour later, the mood shifted. Tony's face went stone-set. You idiot. Why would you change the core algorithm to a quantum neural network? He barked. Do you know how much uncertainty and noise quantum computing injects? How it can destabilize the system? You're the one stuck in traditional machine learning and deep learning, Gowley shot back. You don't get the cutting edge of information science. Quantum neural nets can unleash massive parallelism and computational efficiency. Quantum entanglement and teleportation offer unparalleled encryption. You think you'll guarantee security with entanglement? You're ignoring data spoofing attacks, couplers, interferometers. Your system's full of holes. Any hacker with basic training could break it. Then show me how, Gowley said coolly. Tell me how to bypass my error correction, how to defeat my RNG and quantum one-time pad. Your arguments have no substance. This is easy, Tony returned. Exploit flaws in quantum feedback control and adaptive regulation. Your system is scrap until someone with true vision builds it right. They argued late into the night, a furious collision of two fierce intellects. Tony's forehead, veins throbbed. Every counterpoint Gowley made left him scrambling for a rebuttal. Geniuses, apparently, ground against each other like stones. Finally, Tony claimed victory. Kid, you're 20,000 years away from catching up to Tony Stark, he crowed, striking a triumphant pose. Gowley grunted. Just a minor misstep, he muttered. Tony laughed and yawned. It's late. Get some sleep and let your brain recharge. Tony left the lab after activating the security system. For the first time in a while, he'd enjoyed a debate so much he was almost content. Gowley sat still for a while, breathing down from the adrenaline. He looked up and then realized, has the ceiling always been this high? It wasn't just the ceiling. The entire surrounding space was changing, shifting like a mirrored kaleidoscope. Geometry folded and multiplied, rotating in logically impossible ways. The room expanded and reflected itself over and over. For a moment, Gowley felt utterly exposed. There was nowhere to hide. What's going on? He hissed, heart racing. He slammed the security alarm, but it didn't respond. Damn it, he muttered. I knew Tony's system had issues. Panic flared. FaZe had just been sacrificed. G3 wasn't here. Apart from 2 minor skills, he had no combat power. Then he remembered the golden experience card. A little calmer, he fumbled for it. He jammed the alarm with his left hand. His reflexes was terrifyingly fast, and with his right hand he pounded the keyboard, trying to contact the outside world. 7. Section 7. There's no need to waste your energy. The mirror dimension is isolated from the outside world. You can't send any messages. A neutral voice, neither clearly male nor female, echoed through the space. Gowley lifted his head, wary. Who? A bald head emerged from a fiery circle floating behind the door. A monk's robe draped over the figure. My name is the Ancient One. I am the Sorcerer Supreme who protects Earth. Think of me as a guardian against the dimension gods. A sorcerer? Gowley blinked. So these anomalies are all caused by magic? He hadn't watched many Marvel films in his previous life and only had a hazy impression of what sorcery might be. The Ancient One nodded. Exactly. Changes like this, if they're not from hallucinogens, what's the principle behind them? Gowley asked, curiosity kicking in for a moment before reality reasserted itself. He was trapped in an unfamiliar space with no obvious defenses. The fact that the Ancient One spoke instead of attacking suggested she wasn't openly hostile. Maybe he could negotiate a way out and possibly learn something about magic. You're a scientist, so in theory you have nothing to do with magic, the Ancient One said, but your existence threatens this world, this timeline. Gowley gaped. He was an ordinary scientist sitting at home. Suddenly he was being labeled a danger to the world and the timeline. Me? A threat? I'm not being dramatic, but how could I? An ordinary scientist without any supernatural powers be some timeline-level menace. Gao Li spread his hands, adopting an innocent expression. Or is this one of those movie tropes? You saw me turn into some great demon king in the future and came back to stop it. I don't know what you will become, the Ancient One interrupted, shaking her head. I cannot see your future. That's exactly the problem, she went on. With the Eye of Agamotto, I can read timelines, but anything connected to you is blurry. Your presence makes the future chaotic. Gao Li was stunned. He had only mentioned the Eye of Agamotto offhand. He hadn't expected the Ancient One to actually claim sight of the future. Whether or not it was possible, he decided to play along. Even if you can't see my future clearly, that doesn't make me a hazard. Maybe, under my influence, the future will be brighter. I can't deny that possibility, the Ancient One said slowly. Right now, the current you is innocent. That's why I observed you for many years without intervening. Gao Li frowned. So something changed recently and made you decide to act? Yes. The Ancient One nodded. The knowledge you've acquired, the Kamen Rider technology, shouldn't exist in this world. I've observed thousands of timelines and never seen anything like it. You are a singularity that will have a huge impact on the timeline. That will trigger massive changes. Some are benign, but some are catastrophic, especially those that interfere with what I call absolute time points. She described them with calm gravity. In thousands of timelines, the same crucial events recur. Tony Stark becoming Iron Man was one such absolute time point, she said. In one world, Stephen Strange kept trying to change the death of his beloved, an event that was an absolute time point. When he finally altered it, his entire world collapsed. The survival of the universe hung on preserving certain fixed points. Gao Li didn't know whether absolute time points were real, but the Ancient One's conviction made him believe she could genuinely perceive timelines. And the more he thought about it, the more he worried his contact with Tony might derail Tony becoming Iron Man. Even a small seed of inspiration could change the course of Tony's life. If Tony got an advanced suit early or avoided the trauma that made him who he became, he might never grow into the man who could stand on his own as a hero. Could my existence destroy the whole world? Gao Li asked, touching his face, suddenly small and uncertain. The Ancient One's expression softened with regret. I'm sorry. To protect the universe, I must eliminate this anomalous factor. She explained the stakes plainly. The time stone depended on the universe's continuity. If the universe collapsed, even she could not reverse time to start over. Her choice had to be the safest one for all reality. I considered other remedies, she told him. If Tony Stark weren't captured in Afghanistan, perhaps he'd be captured elsewhere. I even nudged events to ensure the 10 rings would take him. Gao Li cut in, realizing what she meant. His own intervention had derailed that plan. So it's still my fault? He laughed, bittersweet. That attack was terrible. Even if fewer people had died, there would still be innocent victims, sons, daughters, parents who suffered. Saving hostages and stopping the terrorists, was that a mistake? A small sacrifice is unavoidable, the Ancient One replied. Compared to the entire timeline and universe, those losses are ripples. Your Kamen Rider tech is the strongest advantage this timeline has. If your technology can be preserved while keeping the absolute time points intact, that's the best outcome. So I chose the solution that would benefit the timeline most. Sacrifice a few to save the whole, preserve the absolute time point, and you and your technology can continue to exist. Gao Li inhaled deeply. I don't resent you. I can understand your motives, even if they aren't pure. But I won't stop resisting. I will investigate whether absolute time points are real. It's a scientist's duty. Even if the world is doomed, I will look for a solution before it ends. The Ancient One's face tightened. Words won't change my decision. I won't risk the universe on your assumptions. As far as I can tell, you only have 2 Kamen Rider systems capable of fighting. Phase is unusable, and G3 is not with you. You're defenseless. And even if you could transform, a single Kamen Rider can't stand against me. Any struggle would be futile. That's not necessarily true, Gao Li said with an irritatingly confident smile, as if he were about to play his trump card. To the Ancient One's surprise, a golden card suddenly appeared in Gao Li's hand, as if printed on the spot. What is that? She murmured, pupils narrowing. Her calm, controlled expression flickered into bewilderment. She had never seen anything like it in all her years of observation. Her intuition, honed by long practice, flared. That card was trouble. She must prevent Gao Li from using it. Two glowing golden sigils formed in her hands, ready to be hurled like projectiles. But Gao Li had prepared his own play. He shouted, "Ancient One, you're on fire." She frowned in confusion. She wasn't on fire. But in that instant, Gao Li activated a skill he'd been saving, Invincible Fiery Head. The ancient sorceress's bald head flared up in flames. "What?" she cried as the fire licked her scalp. The pain hit without warning. Over countless years, she'd defended against dimension-sized foes, and nothing had ever ambushed her so cleanly. The flames forced her to cast a quick spell to douse them. Had she not been able to react so fast, the burning could have been fatal. "Heh, you're hot," Gao Li said casually. At the same time, the golden trial card in his hand transformed into a Buggle Driver 2 that locked to his waist, and a black and green Gashot appeared at his side. He didn't hesitate. He pressed the Gashot. Kamen Rider Chronicle. A deep, resonant sound rolled out, and an invisible wave spread. In an instant, a gigantic, colorful clock materialized behind Gao Li, majestic and solemn. The Ancient One, having just put out the flames, snorted coldly and began to manipulate the mirror dimension with a swirl of her hands, only to realize the space no longer obeyed her. Something had overlaid the mirror dimension with another layer she had never felt before, nullifying her control. "What exactly did you do?" she demanded. "Gashot," Gao Li answered, steady and triumphant. Section 8 Gao Li had already pressed the button, and the Gashot slid automatically into the Buggle Driver. "You've answered so many of my questions. I'll return the favor," he said, spreading his arms. "The moment I press this, the game area expands. In other words, this is no longer your mirror dimension. Welcome to my world. Transform. Buggle up." 12 time characters circled his belt as Gao Li spoke. "Rider of Heaven, engrave the chronicle. This moment, right now, is the ultimate time." Time rippled. Outside the experimental building, night reversed to day in an instant. When the chant finished, the figure standing before the Ancient One was a rider the sorcerer had never seen, Kamen Rider Kronos, appearing with a mysterious, grave presence. "What rider is this, and what's happening to the sky?" Ancient One frowned but did not panic. Years of watching had taught her roughly what riders were capable of. She did not know, however, that the Kamen Riders she had seen before had been in basic forms. Kamen Rider Kronos was a final-level boss. "We have no grudge, but since you've chosen to attack me, I won't let myself be slaughtered. Be prepared to be counter-killed." Gao Li pointed. "I hope you've picked a good successor. The Sorcerer Supreme of this generation might end up an antique today." "What arrogance!" Ancient One snorted and began to form magical gestures. Gao Li didn't waste words. He slapped the Buggle Driver 2. Pause. Time stopped. Everything froze. Gao Li didn't intend to engage in a drawn-out duel with a sorcerer of unknown tricks. A quick, decisive strike was his best option. He moved to deliver a flying kick to Ancient One's bald head, but a faint green light glowed from her chest. "What?" Gao Li froze. In the domain where only he should have moved, Ancient One began to move under the green light. For a moment he felt what Dio must have felt facing Jotaro. Within a supposed time stop, she still acted. She must be tapping time-based powers, the Eye of Agamotto, he realized. Ancient One had said she could see the future. Immunity to time stop was not surprising. Ancient One looked at him with mild surprise. "I didn't expect you to control time. What an impressive ability. For most, it would have meant victory, but it's useless against the Eye of Agamotto." Her face showed less alarm than she felt. The Eye held the Time Stone, one of 6 Infinity Stones, the universe's most powerful time force, and yet she had briefly been caught by Gao Li's time stop. Only by the Time Stone's power had she forced herself out of the pause. She guessed, privately, that Gao Li's time stopping was a separate rule tied to his game area, not a simple trumping of the Time Stone. That meant her own time magic wouldn't necessarily shut him down. "As expected of the Sorcerer Supreme," she said outwardly. "This is troublesome. Fortunately, I have other methods." Gao Li, riding the Golden Tier Early Experience card, had all the information flooding in. He was using Kamen Rider Kronos at his peak. He flipped his hand, and a rectangular storage clip popped into it, the energy item storage clip, packed with the regular energy items from the Gem series. Magic is just an effect, he said. There's no reason game items should be inferior. Sorcerer Supreme, is your magic reserve still enough? They struck at the same time. Energies and halos crossed the expanded mirror dimension. Ancient One abandoned close combat and fought from range. Were they to trade blows, her hand-to-hand skill could overwhelm him, but Gao Li's power and speed were beyond ordinary. A casual swing could unleash earth-shattering force, nearly ripping through her defensive arrays. His movement, under 100 meters per second, let him dodge magical beasts and close the distance again and again. If she refused close quarters, Gao Li pushed for it. "Toe!" Gao Li shouted, driving a blow that shattered a projection of Ancient One into a scattering of butterflies. Substitution jutsu? An illusion? He wondered. A new Ancient One appeared high overhead, forming fresh gestures. The spell Images of Ikon split her into a sky of identical Ancient Ones, each with a real physical form like shadow clones. They swung their arms and released crimson bands that wrapped Gao Li from every direction. Numbers against lone strength, the clones could match and even outnumber his 100-ton blows. Gao Li's response was simple. An energy item melted into him from the storage clip. "Want strength? I'll give you strength." Energy item, Muscle Up. Strength surged, pulling dozens of clones into a single crushing force. Then another item, Shrink. In a flash, his body became tiny, slipping easily through the crimson bands. As he dispelled Shrink, he pulled another item, Duplicate. Seems cloning isn't only a mage's trick. Gao Li muttered and summoned a cloud of Gashikon weapons. The Chronos experience card gave him the player driver's abilities too. His duplicates only occurred during attacks, but the multi-Gashikon volley multiplied his strikes dozens of times. Energy slashes rained from the sky, and the Images of Ikon exploded in crimson fire. When the smoke cleared, Ancient One crouched behind multiple defensive arrays, panting and grim. Even a sorcerer who had faced dimensional gods had to admit Kamen Rider Chronos was a nightmare. Those energy items acted like spells with no hand signs and activated faster than her own magic. While she formed one ritual, he stacked 2 or 3 items. Just as she trapped him, 3 items had already countered and broken out. Seeing him charge, Ancient One clapped her hands on the ground. Bolts of Balthak. Thick chains of lightning surged toward him. Gao Li didn't dodge. An item revealed itself. Energy item, Reflect. The massive orange-yellow bolt slammed into an invisible barrier and rebounded exactly back to her. A second Ancient One flashed and deflected the lightning with a ring of sparks, redirecting it elsewhere, but Gao Li was already inches from her, and a punch went straight through the second Ancient One's chest. Ancient One's main body felt the sympathetic hit. "This goes on," she breathed, painfully reinforcing herself with more spells. Their battle had already reduced Experimental Building 6 to dust. The surrounding streets inside the expanded mirror dimension were ruined, as if they'd endured modern war. The mirror dimension's geometric scaling hid the true scope, or Brooklyn itself would have been destroyed. Gao Li stacked more items as he fought. Jump boost, recovery, luck, precognition. With them, he anticipated and constrained her movements, and a careless opening sent Ancient One flying again. She crawled out of the rubble, blood at the corner of her mouth, and her magic array flared red. "It seems I must use forbidden spells." When a parallel world Ancient One found Dr. Strange trying to alter an absolute fixed point in time, she killed him without hesitation. This Ancient One had that resolve. She could call on powers ordinary mages could not contain, and now she risked summoning the horror known only as It. The earth trembled, buildings collapsed. The ground ruptured, and countless gigantic tentacles burst from the earth. "What kind of Thulu Loki is this?" Gao Li cried, swinging his Gashikon and severing tentacles as they rose. But each severed limb regenerated. The tentacles multiplied until he was surrounded. "It's useless," Ancient One said, not letting a hand leave the array. Sweat dotted her bald head, but relief flashed through her eyes. "Its regeneration is endless. You can't defeat it by destruction." Section 9. To be honest, I wouldn't have released Loki if it weren't to eliminate you. Once out of control, Loki's regeneration could overrun the entire Earth. So Loki just has strong regenerative abilities? You could have said that earlier. Gao calmed himself and tapped the fault driver too. Pause. Time stopped again. Even the ancient world-ending Loki froze in that instant. The Ancient One, who had already activated the Eye of Agamotto, remained unaffected, but her face was full of confusion. What do you mean? She couldn't understand Gowley's sudden composure, nor why he would pause time again when she should have known that a time stop wouldn't work on her. Shh! Don't ask so many questions right now. Gowley ignored her and walked calmly toward the tentacled Loki. After all, this is a time of judgment. We can't be too casual. The Ancient One stared, stunned. Did he say what she thought he said? He was going to judge the ancient Loki? Unknown Loki, your existence holds no value for humanity. Therefore, I hereby pass judgment. You shall be discontinued here. Under the Ancient One's incredulous gaze, Gowley pressed the fault driver 2 twice. Finishing move, critical cruise aid. A massive clock projection erupted from beneath Gowley's feet, enveloping him and Loki's central mass. Gowley gathered green energy into his left foot and unleashed a counterclockwise kick. Final blow. As the kick landed, the green energy, like the hands of the clock, coalesced into an emerald beam that swept across the tentacled Loki. A dull impact and streaks of green lightning flared, and an enormous explosion of fire and sound was frozen in that instant. Gowley tapped his belt. Restart! Boom! A column of fire shot into the sky, consuming Loki's core, and a terrifying shockwave leveled the surrounding buildings. What are you doing? I said you couldn't possibly. The Ancient One's words died in her throat. She felt the control device in her hand go inexplicably light, an indication that ancient Loki had taken catastrophic, irrecoverable damage. Her control had suddenly become effortless for the opposite reason. The target had been crippled. How is this possible? There's nothing impossible in the world, Gowley said, hands clasped behind his back as if watching fireworks. Many things that seemed impossible in ancient times have been overcome in modern ones. Just like the Loki you thought could drown the earth with endless regeneration, he isn't as invincible as you imagine. Gowley smiled. Within my time-stopping domain, if I land a finishing move, the damage can be irreversible. Even collapse originators who can prolong their lives would die if I finish them here. Regeneration doesn't save them. How could such a thing exist? The Ancient One's mouth hung open. She had prided herself on outclassing technology with sorcery, but she had never expected this. Gowley's ability had surpassed magic in a way even the Sorcerer Supreme hadn't anticipated. Such things exist, Gowley replied, turning to her. There's no absolute in anything. I thought the Sorcerer Supreme would understand that principle, and I refuse to accept any fixed point in time. I will never resign myself to fate. I will save the world, and I will save myself. Kamen Rider wants both. The Ancient One was silent for a moment, then forced herself to speak. Gori Parker, I admit I miscalculated. I was arrogant before, speaking to you as if I were doing you a favor. Gowley gave a helpless sigh. You really are impervious to reason. Then I will correct my mistake. The Ancient One duplicated herself countless times to block Gowley while the original rose into the air, the Eye of Agamotto on her chest glowing emerald. I'll go back to before you use that card and kill you with one blow. No tricks. That is the best choice. Time reversal. Gowley's pupils tightened. If she could see the future and resist time stops, reversing time was not unimaginable. You wish, he muttered and charged. The endless Ancient Ones clung to him, sacrificing themselves and pinning him in place. The Ancient One did not waste words this time. She began the hand seals to manipulate the time stone. Isn't it just time reversal? Don't think you're the only one who can do that. Seeing he couldn't stop her, Gowley fed energy into the Fault Driver 2 at his waist. If she wanted to reset him to the state before he transformed into Kamen Rider Kronos, he would reset her to the state before she activated the reversal. If she wanted a nested game, he would play. His eyes flashed orange and green, two colored flames licked his form. The grand clock of his transformation reappeared behind him, but this time its hands spun wildly backward beneath a deep green glow. Reset! What? The Ancient One cried out. Kamen Rider Kronos also possessed the power to rewind time. It wasn't subordinate to the time stone. Two independent systems had begun to reverse time simultaneously. Space-time was like a helpless fabric being pulled in opposite directions. Crack! The mirror dimension and the game area both split like glass, cracks racing outward. Trying to force a single fabric to obey two contradictory laws only tore it apart. No! The Ancient One realized too late what would happen. She tried to distance herself from the epicenter, but the damage was done. At the fracture in space-time, a black hole, vast and abyssal, opened. Gao Li didn't even have time to understand before it swallowed him whole. The mirror dimension and the game area collapsed, and the self-correcting force of the real world began to reassert itself, shrinking the black hole until it disappeared. "Is this over?" the Ancient One whispered, shaken and breathless. The backlash from her failed reversal had inflicted severe internal injuries. She'd never before experienced two separate time laws reversing simultaneously. The result, however, was clear. Gao Li had vanished from this world. In that sense, the Ancient One had achieved her objective. Yet even in defeat, she could not deny the depth of the impression Gao Li had left. He was more troublesome than many demon lords. Suppressing the blood rising in her throat, she cast a spatial ring and returned to Kamartaj. The next evening, Tony sat in the lab with bloodshot eyes, breathing hard amid scattered experimental equipment. "Gone? Just gone?" he muttered like a man possessed, anger and unwillingness in his voice. That morning, he'd woken determined to find Gao Li again, to mock him, and maybe start a new round of brainstorming. The debates had become addictive. But Gao Li was nowhere. At first, Tony assumed Gao Li had sulked off after losing yesterday's confrontation and was hiding, embarrassed. Then he watched the surveillance footage and couldn't laugh anymore. In the video, Gao Li in the lab simply vanished into thin air. For a moment afterward, a bald man whose face wasn't visible appeared and then left, as if by magic. What had happened? Tony had no idea. He spent hours applying every technical method he knew to verify the feed had not been edited or tampered with. The footage was real. For the rest of the day and night, he threw every method at the problem and came up empty. He had never felt such helplessness. There was something in this world he could not reach, no matter how hard he tried, and that realization ate at him. Pepper, waiting outside the lab door, saw him hollow-eyed and alarmed. "Tony, are you okay?" He stared at her, then the guilt and worry broke free. "Pepper, His voice was hoarse. "I failed to protect that child. I promised him I could keep him safe, and now I couldn't do anything." He trailed off, crushed. Pepper wrapped him in a hug, heart aching. "It's not your fault. That kid's smart. He can protect himself." Tony shook his head wordlessly in her arms. Gao Li, meanwhile, felt as if he had fallen into the abyss and been asleep for a very long time. The darkness around him was like a deep sea. He sank and drifted. After an unknowable while, he felt a buoyancy, a rising. The dark turned lighter from above until he broke the surface and struggled to open his eyes. He groaned. His limbs felt weak, as if they hadn't moved in years. He looked up at an unfamiliar ceiling. Around him came the beeps and whirs of instruments, medical equipment. Suddenly, a commotion rose nearby. 10. Section 10. He's awake. He's awake. Call Wayne Industries. Quickly notify Alfred." Not long after, an old but vigorous man arrived at Gao Li's bedside, grasping his hand with tears in his eyes. "Young Master Gao Li, you're finally awake. That's wonderful. Truly wonderful." Gao Li strained to turn his head and saw the man still wiping at his eyes. He felt moved and said weakly, "I'm sure young Master Bruce will be very happy if he knows." "Alfred, Wayne Industries? Bruce, welcome to Gotham City?" P.S. Some readers mentioned before that Gao Li uses original special effects technology. I'll explain here. Later, Gao Li will create his own transformation items using special effects technology, such as highly compatible Gaia memories that extract concepts from different Earths and belong only to him. The two major technologies Gao Li obtained early on are, first, Kamen Rider G3, essentially a technology to develop an armor system similar to Iron Man's. The armor can be named anything. Gao Li could name it G1454 if he wanted. There's no issue of originality. The second is Kamen Rider Phase, a rider system that originally was only safe for Orphnox to use. Other riders in the same series have even worse side effects. Phase is already the most stable and safest version. Fundamentally, the technology isn't well suited to ordinary humans. Gao Li doesn't need to make additional originals based on it. Doing so would only increase the danger. Chapter 15, Batman's Brother? 2023, 0820. Gao Li first chose not to answer out loud. Instead, he searched his mind for any lingering memories. He wasn't unfamiliar with the terms Alfred, Wayne, or Bruce. If nothing unexpected had happened, then this should be Gotham City, a world with Superman and Batman, a DC universe, not the Marvel universe. If nothing unexpected had happened, he'd had an accident, another unexpected transmigration. No memories at all. Did I transgrade as a soul, or was it a physical body swap? If it was soul transmigration, I shouldn't have inherited memories. Physical transmigration doesn't make sense either. How could I have become young Master Gao Li? His brain raced. Soon he noticed a pile of unread messages in the system. System upgrade version 2.0? Gao Li murmured when he read the most important notification in shock. After skimming the rest, he roughly understood what had happened. The space-time rift created during the battle with the Ancient One had not only allowed him to escape the Marvel Universe, but had also enabled the system to absorb a large amount of special space-time energy, upgrading its version and unlocking new functions. Thanks to the system, instead of arriving in some other parallel reality, Gao Li had pierced the limits of the Marvel multiverse and landed in the DC multiverse's 10,000 sky mirror. The biggest surprise was the system's new function. It could let him travel freely between the Marvel and DC universes. For now, only his soul consciousness could make the trip, but Gao Li was already satisfied. This isn't just another parallel space-time. It's an entirely new world, with completely different black tech and new knowledge. And this is only 2.0. Maybe later there'd be 3.0 or 4.0, letting him visit even more worlds. Since only my soul can travel back and forth, that proves this body isn't Gori Parker's, Gao Li thought. Gori Parker had been his own body in a previous life. He had grown up as Gori Parker and had taken a decade to absorb memories from that life. This body, though, was probably Gao Li Wayne. After all, Alfred had called him young Master Gao Li. Had he usurped someone else's identity? He hadn't watched much DC fiction before, but he had never heard of Bruce Wayne having a biological brother, at least not in the mainstream. In some alternate universes, Bruce does have an older brother named Thomas Wayne Jr., but in this universe, Bruce's brother was named Gao Li. Gao Li had no idea about that, so he felt flustered. It would have been bad enough with anyone else, but it was Batman. Batman, the legendary mortal mastermind who could reduce the Justice League to rubble with his planning, a man suspicious of everything. If Gao Li interacted with Batman, it seemed likely he'd be discovered quickly. The thought filling his skull was simple: danger. He'd arrived in gifted, dangerous Gotham and was tethered to a family that included Batman. Life had suddenly become precarious. Young Master Gao Li? Young Master Gao Li? Alfred's concerned voice snapped Gao Li out of his spiraling thoughts. He forced a smile that felt uglier than a cry. What now? He needed information, and fast. Should I keep pretending to be an idiot? But I don't know what happened before, so pretending could expose me, or seem too deliberate. After a few seconds of struggling, Gao Li decided to take the risk and communicate with Alfred to learn the current situation. Excuse me, I just woke up. My head still hurts a bit, and you. He faltered, unable to find the right words. Alfred patted his head gently and apologized. I am very sorry. I was too excited and overlooked things. Young Master Gao Li, you may not recognize me yet. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Alfred Pennyworth, butler to the Wayne family. Do you know your name is Gao Li Wayne? Do you understand what words like family and butler mean? If there's anything unclear, please ask me. You must know that I would never harm you. Alfred's tone was oddly patronizing, as if speaking to a preschooler. That puzzled Gao Li. If he truly were Gao Li Wayne, why would the family butler be unsure of him? Why ask if he understood basic words? Did Alfred think he might lack self-awareness or memory? The questions piled up until Gao Li had to ask something concrete. Alfred, what happened to me? Alfred didn't seem surprised. He answered patiently, as if explaining to a child. Half an hour of story later, Gao Li's expression grew stranger and stranger. Gao Li Wayne was Bruce Wayne's younger brother, 7 years younger. When Bruce was 7, Martha Wayne was pregnant with Gao Li. On the eve of her delivery, Martha and Thomas Wayne took Bruce to the theater. When the family left, they were attacked. Martha and Thomas were shot and killed by a gangster. They could not be saved, but doctors managed to rescue the fetus from Martha's womb. Gao Li survived. Unfortunately, due to oxygen deprivation during the incident, Gao Li's brain was damaged. He'd been like a mentally challenged child since infancy, responding only with the simplest mechanical reactions to stimuli. The Wayne family spent vast sums researching treatments. The doctors eventually discovered that despite the damage, Gao Li retained learning ability and had even spontaneously learned language by overhearing conversations. That discovery came from carefully designed tests while probing his mechanical responses. How proficient his reading or other knowledge was remained unclear. This state persisted until recently, when Gao Li Wayne began showing signs of regaining his sanity. The implications were obvious and strange. If the brain damage had been physical, it shouldn't just heal because his soul arrived. Yet his thoughts were clear now. His brain function seemed perfectly fine. It felt like Gao Li Wayne had been an empty shell, waiting for a soul to inhabit it. P.S. Thank you, Alex Bingfeng, for the 500-point reward. Chapter 16, I am the evil rich man, 2023-0820. If anything shady existed here, the good news was that Gao Li hadn't stolen someone else's living consciousness. The bad news was that he'd fallen into the schemes of some powerful beings. Again, it explained why he felt so paranoid about the Ancient One. If she hadn't revealed herself, who would have guessed that a time-reversing, future-peaking super expert had been watching him and even orchestrated the crisis that nearly killed him? Had Ancient One not underestimated him, Gao Li might have been killed outright. Even if she'd revealed herself, without the Kamen Rider Chronos card, he might still have been at her mercy. There was too little information to fully understand matters now. He needed to gather more. I wonder what Batman's situation is. Has Superman shown up? Is there a Justice League? I'll only know after I learn more. Gao Li decided to be proactive. He cleared his throat. Alfred, can I call you Fred? Yes, young master. You may call me whatever you wish. Then, Fred, Gao Li thought for a moment and asked, you said I have an older brother, Bruce. Where is he? Why didn't he come with you? Alfred looked troubled for a moment, then answered carefully. Young Master Gao Li, young Master Bruce doesn't know you're awake. He's not intentionally neglecting you. Currently, Master Bruce is, you might say, studying abroad around the world. He's difficult to contact and often moves in ways I cannot track. Relief washed over Gao Li. Bruce was still young, only 7 years older than him, so he could plausibly be away training. Batman hadn't already been at his side. Gao Li's confidence leapt and he pushed himself to sit up. Fred, I think I can be discharged. No, what I mean is, I think I've fully recovered and can go home. Alfred took his hand with a smile that was practically paternal. Going home would be wonderful. Wayne Manor needs a master. Alfred treated both Bruce and Gao Li like his own sons. Bruce's long absences left the old butler guarding a lonely house. Gao Li coming home filled that void. Alfred wasn't at all worried whether Gao Li's weak body could handle Wayne Manor. With the Wayne Group's resources, they could outfit the manor with top-tier medical equipment and 24-hour care. Young Master Gao Li, once I make the necessary preparations, you can return home without worry. Alfred rose eagerly, impatient to handle the arrangements. The sooner the better, as far as he was concerned. Okay, then before that, could you get me some literacy materials? Gao Li asked. He planned to reveal his reading ability gradually. It might be plausible that a mentally impaired child learned to speak by listening, but if Gao Li suddenly knew how to read and write, that could raise questions. No problem. If you prefer, I can invite a professor from Gotham University's language department to tutor you, or perhaps someone from the education department, Alfred offered. Gao Li's mouth twitched. I don't think that's necessary. I might learn faster by self-study. 11. Section 11. Are you dissatisfied with Gotham University? I can also hire top professors from MIT or Harvard for a considerable sum, or perhaps you prefer universities outside the United States, Cambridge or Oxford, perhaps. Alfred's excitement spilled out as he listed options. I said stop. Gao Li cut him off, halting the overly eager butler. Alfred, have some faith in my learning ability. My apologies. I seem to have lost my composure. The books will be prepared for you shortly. I shall not disturb you further. I wish you pleasant studies." Alfred, ever the consummate gentleman and the butler knight, quickly composed himself, bowed, and withdrew. True to his word, the books Gowley needed arrived soon after. All he had to do each day was feign reading them. When Alfred reappeared after a prolonged absence, it was to usher Gowley out of the hospital. "You've arrived at just the right time. I now have virtually no obstacles to my reading," Gowley announced, amused. Alfred wasn't surprised. He had seen that exceptionally fast learning before with Bruce. This young man clearly belonged among geniuses. As Bruce's brother, now that Gowley had returned to normal, it was reasonable he'd have the same abilities. Riding in the extended bulletproof Lincoln, Gowley asked with curiosity, "Alfred, what have you been preparing while I was in the hospital?" "To ensure your health can be maintained here, I purchased the adjacent empty lot and built Wayne Hospital," Alfred replied politely. The medical staff were carefully selected from across the United States and recruited with generous salaries. You need not worry about their professional standard. Gowley stared, stunned. Is this how the rich solve problems? A whole hospital built just for him? In his previous life, he'd met Tony Stark, who casually bought skyscrapers. In this life, it was the Wayne Group casually building hospitals. "Seems I have a knack for befriending billionaires," he murmured to himself, then brightened. This time, it was different. He was part of the super rich. He was the billionaire. The Lincoln pulled into the sprawling estate of Wayne Manor. The castle-like manor loomed as they approached. "Welcome home, young Master Gowley," Alfred announced, opening the door and guiding him inside, explaining the purpose of each room with patient thoroughness. That night, Gowley lay on his luxurious bed, 2,500 millimeters long, and brought up the long-neglected system interface. After his fierce battle with the Ancient One, his arrival in the DC universe, and becoming Bruce Wayne's biological brother, so many huge changes had occurred. Those changes had yielded 3 draws. Earlier, at the sanatorium, drawing virtual items like experience cards would have been fine, but he had worried about drawing bulky physical rewards he couldn't explain or store. Now that he was home, he could finally see them. He'd already peeked at the draw levels impatiently at the hospital. All 3 were S-rank. Not the highest, but 3 S-rank draws at once was unprecedented for him. Gowley reasoned it made sense. His fight with Ancient One and his arrival in the DC universe didn't cause large-scale changes to this world. The Mirror World battle had almost no impact on the real world, though it had affected 2 important figures, Ancient One and Tony, so an S-rank was justified. Crossing worlds was a big event in itself, and becoming Bruce's brother affected a major character, even if it was more like his soul returning to an existing role. 3 S-ranks seemed reasonable. All right, draw them all at once, he decided, summoning 3 illusory gotcha machines. Their displays flashed and spun wildly before slowing and condensing into 3 items, 2 thick, handwritten notebooks, and a memory card. "All 3 are physical rewards?" Gowley murmured. He inspected the system description for the first notebook. His pupils widened. Dimuzaw's magic research notes. Magic. He'd just tangled with the Ancient One's magic, and now he had access to knowledge about magic itself. But magic felt alien to his scientific bent. Could he really learn it? Unlike the tech and research he excelled at, magic was unfamiliar territory. He hesitated, then checked the second notebook. Wajima Shigeru's grinding and ring-making notes. Artisan notes? He read on. These were instructions for grinding and processing magic stones into wizard rings, complementary to Dimuzaw's notes. Both belonged to the Kamen Rider wizard world, a core technology set Gowley hadn't studied before. It looked like the 2 notebooks were a pair. Reluctantly, he resolved to learn magic. It would be wasteful otherwise, and maybe, with magic knowledge, he could counter Ancient One someday. He turned to the memory card with anticipation. The 3rd reward's description lit him up. Astronomical switch research data, right in his wheelhouse. Technology that could harness cosmic energy. Irresistible. He called Alfred for an offline computer and dove in, but an initial read dampened his excitement. The astronomical switch data was complete, but the switch alone wasn't enough. He'd also need the Force driver, the transformation console used by Kamen Rider Force. The Force driver is the control interface. Without it, the astronomical switch couldn't be wielded. He could try to build a control console from scratch, but there was no guarantee it would enable transformation, and the engineering challenge would be enormous, possibly years of work. The data made clear the astronomical switch was not purely Earth tech. It originated from a crystal-like core, purportedly gifted to various planets by a deep space entity called the Presenter to gather data about civilizations. In short, the switch was an imitation of alien technology, difficult to reproduce with Earth science. With no quick route to the astronomical switch's power, Gowli shifted attention to Di Muzou's magic research notes. His earlier worries evaporated as he read. This wasn't mysticism, but a scientist's approach to magic. Di Muzou had tried to reproduce legendary magic using modern scientific techniques. Magic in the Kamen Rider wizard setting divided into two kinds. Ancient magic, exemplified by Kamen Rider Beast, was dangerous, requiring regular feeding of the phantom demon within, or risk being consumed by it. Modern magic, represented by Kamen Rider Wizard, used scientific devices like drivers together with wizard rings, making magic much safer. Essentially, Di Muzou's research aimed to reproduce modern magic through technology. So I can reproduce magic with technology and become a magician myself, Gowli thought, suddenly awake with excitement. But the notes listed prerequisites. A user must be a gate, someone born with innate magical power, and they must house a phantom demon. Gowli's heart sank. He had neither. He read on. Di Muzou had faced the same problem. Born with magic, he still lacked a phantom demon. Traditionally, a gate would condense magical power into a phantom demon by falling into despair, a perilous ritual that could turn you into a phantom demon and kill you. Di Muzou couldn't risk that. So he researched how to artificially create a phantom demon by refining and crystallizing magical power. Gowli found the logic compelling. If a phantom demon is an aggregation of a gate's magical energy, then in theory, it could be synthesized through careful refinement and crystallization. He sketched possible research directions in his head, running thought experiments as if racing Duzou's intellect across time and space. It felt like solving a puzzle and gave him the same thrill Tony must have felt when faced with brilliant engineering problems. Of course, the comparison wasn't fair. Di Muzou had done the slow, painstaking work while Gowli was sprinting through ideas in an instant, but it only made him appreciate the genius at work. He stayed up all night, reading, thinking, and mapping experiments in his head. When his eyes ached and he finally put the notebook down, daylight was already streaming through the window. Section 12, it's morning. Gowli rubbed his eyes. His body felt a little tired, but his spirits were high. Scientists were used to late nights. Experiments have to be done at odd hours. Data analysis is hard to break off once you start. Key instruments are easier to book at night, and projects often ran in parallel to keep progress moving. After a quick breakfast to refuel his brain, he was ready to get back to work. He rang the bell for Alfred. The butler took in Gowli's bloodshot eyes with deep concern. "Master Gowli, you're still young, but you can't abuse your body like this, especially after just being discharged from the sanatorium." "Don't worry," Gowli waved him off. "I've been doing rehab. I'm in good shape. Staying up all night won't be a problem." Alfred sighed. "Then I'll prepare breakfast and some coffee. Please try to rest at noon. The human body isn't a machine, and even a machine overheats if it runs too long." Alfred was the consummate butler. Under his care, Gowli didn't have to think about food, clothing, or any of the small things. Alfred handled everything. Sometimes Gowli joked that Alfred must possess some time-bending skill to keep Wayne Manor running so smoothly. It was an environment made for someone who lived to study, and Gowli threw himself into learning day and night, studying Di Muzou's work and Wajima Shigeru's notes until the margins blurred together. The two sets of notes complemented each other. Both were essential to understand modern magic. Luckily, Wajima Shigeru's process for creating the Magic Master's Ring was pure technology, no innate magic required, so Gowli's progress accelerated rapidly. Alfred's patience didn't hold forever. After repeated ignored warnings, his tone grew sharper. "Master Gowli," he said one morning, "if you want to live to see Master Bruce, you'd better stop sleeping only 4 hours a night." "Did you stay up last night again?" Gowli grinned. "Please, no book is worth sacrificing your health for. Sleep feeds the brain. You're making yourself worse." Some say sleep deprivation makes people hallucinate, Alfred went on in that dry, nagging way. Perhaps those illusions are your body's alarm bells. Though the food remained excellent and the service impeccable, Alfred's constant lectures began to weigh on Gao Li. It felt like being monitored by an overanxious mother. Gao Li often wondered how Bruce Wayne managed to fight crime every night without Alfred breathing down his neck. Indulgence only slows down my research. 2023-0820. Gao Li kept a sporadic diary, more of a memo than a secret, because, to outsiders, his entries read like the overwrought notes of a Chunibu teenager. July 5th. After days of Alfred's relentless nagging, I've started thinking about the harm of all-nighters. Alfred's scolding is terrifying. July 6th. I feel weaker. That explains why I couldn't beat so-and-so in close combat. I'll go to bed early from tomorrow. July 7th. Finished reading The Essence and Mechanism of Magical Phenomena. Analyzed energy, matter, information, consciousness in magic. Felt great. Forgot to sleep. Alfred scolded me. July 8th. Alfred yelled again, but I set up a scientific model and theoretical framework for magic phenomena, worth the all-nighter. July 9th. Alfred's at it again. I finished methods and techniques of magical operation and couldn't stop. July 10th. How is Alfred so polite and sarcastic at once? I slept 3 hours after tonight's experiment. July 11th. Felt nauseous all day. Body's still weak. I'll sleep 2 more hours tonight. I'm desperate to know the conditions, tools, procedures, and rules for magic operation. July 12th. Alfred was gentle today. Maybe he noticed I'm unwell. I'll focus on how to manipulate magic through rituals, spells, symbols, and artifacts. July 13th. Experiment worked. To celebrate, stayed up all night running detection and evaluation of magical effects. July 14th. Alfred scolded me again. I've been meaning to go to bed early for a week. Today, I'll develop quantitative indicators for magic effects, then sleep early tomorrow. July 15th. Success. Used instruments, sensors, and algorithms to objectively measure magical effects. Tonight, I'll keep verifying effectiveness and reliability. July 16th. Master Gao Li, how depraved. I keep promising to sleep more. I'll rest tomorrow. July 17th. This session is important. I'll stay up all night. Before he knew it, half a year had passed. Alongside obsessively studying the 2 notebooks and repeatedly reviewing the astronomical switch's technical data, Gao Li earned a degree from Gotham University, entirely remotely to avoid wasting time commuting. Alfred, wary of exposing the recently convalesced second heir of Wayne Industries to the world, had everyone involved sign strict confidentiality agreements, so the story made no waves. Rumors about the Wayne family blew up at the slightest hint of scandal. A quietly earned degree in 6 months would have been unstoppable news, otherwise. On the spacious balcony overlooking the manor, Gao Li sipped the black tea Alfred had brewed and muttered to himself. No matter how thorough his theoretical work, he lacked one thing. He wasn't a door. There was no trace of innate magic in his body. Phantom demons can grant magic to magic masters, and I can artificially create phantom demons, he thought, tracing the limits he'd found. But in this system, magic masters themselves must possess magic to interact with a phantom demon. He pinched his forehead. Kamen Rider wizard Kaujing Chingren's Infinity Magic Ring, for example, showed what happened when a user's magic power fused with the phantom demon dragons. After transcending despair, they became one. Before that, their magic power and the phantom demons were separate. If supplying phantom demons alone were enough, Di Mu Zhao, who could manufacture phantom demons, wouldn't have needed to collect magic power and seek doors with such effort. He could have mass-produced magic masters. Gao Li didn't have innate magic, but he had money. Alfred, he said, setting down his cup, gather intelligence and rumors about magic from around the world, screen them, and then generously hire any extraordinary individuals, not just famous names. Alfred frowned, hesitating before he spoke. There really is magic in the world? Are you sure you're thinking clearly, Master Gao Li? Gao Li blinked. In Alfred's eyes, the last 6 months of Gao Li's life had been eccentric, metaphysics-heavy experiments that looked more like expensive hobbies. The Wayne family could afford eccentricity, and Alfred had always indulged Gao Li. Now Gao Li wanted to find other believers? Alfred suspected it was a slip down a dangerous path. Sensing Alfred's look, Gao Li felt a twinge of irritation. Alfred, I'm clear-headed. Miracles and magic exist. Alfred paused, then dryly, "Do you mean friendship is magic?" Gowley stared. Alfred muttered on, "So you want me to help you find some friends? Well, that might be good. Master Gowley doesn't have many peers." "That's not it," Gowley snapped, then relented. "Never mind. Just do as I said. Soon you'll see real magic." When Gowley made a decision, Alfred executed it. Within days, 3 dossiers lay on Gowley's desk. Madame Shangdu, John Constantine, Zatanna Zatara. Money made all introductions easy. Madame Shangdu, an unrivaled diviner, could be hired through the networks Wayne Industries had cultivated among the powerful. Zatanna, a stage magician who actually wielded real magic, could be booked under the pretense of a commercial performance. Constantine, when offered a high enough price, would take almost any job. He was notoriously unscrupulous but effective. They were all recognized names, each with a storied reputation. Madame Shangdu descended from ancient lines. Her elder sisters included Vivienne, the Lady of the Lake who gifted King Arthur his scabbard and sword, and Morgan Le Fay, one of Arthurian legend's great antagonists. Shangdu's strength lay not in combat but in foresight. No one rivaled her. Zatanna, though less famous than her father Giovanni John Zatara, had inherited his gift, reverse speech magic. Speak a phrase backward and the corresponding spell happened, an astonishingly versatile and powerful ability. Constantine's reputation was the worst of the 3. Hell's denizens hated him, and for good reason. He had outwitted demons and even Lucifer himself. He was a scoundrel and a survivor. Zatanna arrived at Gotham Airport and was driven to Wayne Manor in a black car. Reading the invitation in the back seat, she looked stunned when Wayne Manor came into view, an almost princely estate grafted onto Gotham City. The fee the Waynes had offered was 10 times her usual rate. Her smile widened. Big client, she thought. If she could secure a relationship and a few repeat bookings, she could buy herself time to search for her missing father. Giovanni Zatara had vanished without explanation, and Zatanna had devoted herself to finding him. She wasn't worried whether Wayne's young master would get tired of her act. She could make anyone addicted after one show. She had real magic, a real advantage over ordinary performers. In the reception room, she met the others. "Madame Shangdu, and is that John Constantine?" Zatanna asked. She'd met Madame Shangdu a few times through her father, so she recognized the diviner immediately. Constantine, smoking by the window, barely glanced at her. Shangdu, graceful and ageless, waved warmly. "Xiaojia, you've grown. Come here and let me see you," she said. "Were you invited by the Wayne family for divination?" Zatanna asked as she approached. Shangdu smiled. "Wayne Industries reached out to me through many channels. I thought it might be a reading, but since you two were invited as well, it may be something else." "You can't predict Wayne Industries' purpose?" Zatanna blinked. "Can't you see the future?" Shangdu looked rueful. "Even diviners avoid reading their own fates. Miracles come with a price, and I don't like paying it more than necessary." At that moment, the reception room door opened and a young man entered with a polite smile, followed by a familiar butler. 13. Section 13. "Welcome, the 3 of you. Let me introduce myself." Gowley Wayne folded his hands with a polite smile. "My name is Gowley Wayne, and I'm the one who invited you." "Young Master Gowley, it's fine that you summoned these 2 for side jobs," Alfred muttered from behind him. "But why me?" "I had a quick look around Wayne Manor. There isn't anything here that needs exercising." Constantine blew a lazy smoke ring, and after delivering the rude remark, shifted into a playful grin. "Of course, if you've invited me for the kind of parties dignitaries enjoy, I'd be more than willing, and I wouldn't even ask for payment." "You seem to have a few misconceptions about me," Gowley said quietly. "Orgies only slow down my scientific work, but since we're here about the reason for this meeting, I'll get straight to the point. You are all well-known figures in the magic world. I need to borrow your wisdom. Help me find a way to awaken my magic." The room fell silent. Alfred, who'd been listening from the doorway, visibly lost his composure first. To him, the whole scene sounded like a preposterous Chunibu proclamation. He expected laughter, ridicule, anything but the calm, thoughtful looks that crossed the faces of the 3 guests. Instead of mockery, Madame Shangdu considered his words and then asked, "Mr. Wayne, do you mean you want to acquire magic, or that you wish to be able to use magic?" Alfred was dumbfounded. These 3 were not scoffing. Were their answers serious? Had young Master Gao Li collected a house full of charlatans to put on a show? This was still the early days, long before the superhero era, so strange figures weren't an everyday sight in the papers or in the streets. Alfred's worldview remained solidly materialistic. He had reviewed the three guests' public profiles and decided they looked like frauds, very famous frauds, perhaps. Madame Shangdu had renown among the powerful, but her prophecies were deliberately vague and rarely seemed miraculous on closer inspection. Zatanna had the stage magic persona. Some of her feats might be true magic, some very clever illusion. Constantine struck Alfred as textbook con artist, an amateur exorcist who could mumble words, sprinkle salt, and then demand payment. Gao Li, however, showed no such inner turmoil. "What's the difference between the two?" he asked. Madame Shangdu explained, "You might think a magician both has magic and knows how to use it, but the two are distinct. Some rituals can be performed by people without innate magic, provided the rite is done correctly. Others are born with magic but never learn to use it and live indistinguishable lives from ordinary people." "Which type are each of you?" Gao Li asked. The three exchanged glances and hesitated, until Gao Li added, "If it's a privacy issue, consider it paid. Each of you who speaks will receive an additional $500,000 in information fees. The decision is yours." Zatanna, who could always use money, spoke first. "I'm the kind who both has magic and knows how to wield it, the standard form of magician. Also," she added with a glance at Gao Li, "your family's reverse speech magic isn't what I'd call standard. From King Arthur's time to now, I've rarely seen anything like it." Madame Shangdu laughed softly. "My background isn't a great secret in the magic world, but I'm not like ordinary magicians. I belong to an ancient race. Think of it as a type of elf. I was born with magic and the ability to use it, so I'm not the best reference." "An elf? So you aren't human?" Gao Li's curiosity lit up. "You mentioned King Arthur. Did you meet him yourself?" "Of course," Madame Shangdu said proudly. "My sister is the lake fairy Vivian, the very spirit who gave King Arthur his holy sword and scabbard." Gao Li's awe was almost childlike. "A legendary figure. Then, was King Arthur a woman?" Madame Shangdu blinked. "What are you talking about? King Arthur was a man." Gao Li's face fell a little. "I see. Could that holy sword fire light cannons?" Madame Shangdu's expression slid toward bafflement. "It's a holy sword, not a weapon of that sort. How could it fire light cannons?" She sighed and added, "Enough of that. Mr. Wayne, why are you asking?" Constantine gave a low chuckle. "Since you're paying so well, I won't hide anything. I'm an unorthodox magician, practically no magic of my own." Gao Li straightened. "Then why not acquire magic? Or is it impossible to gain magic later in life?" Constantine lit another cigarette. "Acquiring magic is easy for someone like me. If I tease a high-level demon out of its heart and keep it close, I'll gain magic, like being exposed to a source of radiation. But, like radiation, magic is dangerous. For the generous fee, I'll offer one piece of advice. Avoid magic if you can. No one who learns it ever comes to a good end." He spread his hands, grinning. Zatanna snapped at him, scandalized. "How dare you say that here? How is magic a curse? Where does learning magic lead to no good end?" Constantine, bored with arguing with the young, only smirked. "You want to know? I could teach you, starting in bed." Zatanna's face clouded, ready to retaliate with her reverse speech sorcery, but Madame Shangdu reached over and stopped her. "We are guests here at Wayne Manor. Please don't damage anything. Being rude won't help." She looked at Constantine with a slow, serious gaze. "I think I know what he meant. It isn't a simple curse on youth. You might be too young to understand this. All miraculous powers, including magic, answer to a master. If you gain magic, it's like taking on a debt to the Lord of Magic. When the creditor comes to collect, those who cannot repay do not end well." Gao Li's interest sharpened. "When does the Lord of Magic collect? Does every magician get collected in their lifetime?" "No one knows." Madame Shangdu admitted. "No one's been collected yet. In that sense, frightening as it sounds, it's a worry without proof." Constantine sneered. "That's only during one's lifetime. Death isn't the end. Afterwards is infinite, and that debt can be etched on your soul forever." Both Constantine and Madame Shangdu were too weary to argue at length. Gao Li interjected. "You mentioned magic spreading like radiation, passed from person to person. If magic is contagious, it must have a source. In that case, when someone acquires magic, they're inheriting a portion of the previous person's magic, hence the debt idea. Constantine snapped his fingers. As befitting a top capitalist's heir, your analogy is vivid. That's basically accurate, so give it up. I can teach you a few tricks, but avoid getting involved. Gowley's mouth twisted in a knowing smile. I'm not lacking magic, only the ability to use it. My point is, if there were a method to generate magic out of thin air, wouldn't that let one escape the risk of magic debt? Constantine laughed and then stopped, surprised to find Gowley still serious. Madame Shangdu and Zatanna exchanged skeptical looks. A young, non-magical man claiming he could generate magic from nothing. Were they wasting their time? Yes, I'm serious, Gowley said calmly. But the method needs magic as the initial trigger. He took a stack of documents from his bag, pages crowded with circles, runes, and precise diagrams. I don't know everything about magic, but I know quite a bit about my own system I developed. The three experts accepted the papers more out of courtesy than expectation, but as they read, their faces changed. The skeptical smirks vanished, replaced by astonishment, then shock. It's real? Constantine murmured, dropping his cigarette. Even an expert like Constantine could see from the diagrams and logic that this was not amateurish. Zatanna's eyes lit up. Incredible. There's even this kind of idea. Gowley's new system proposed that magic, besides being innate, could also originate from entities he called phantom demons. These beings appeared as byproducts of magic activation and became central to a new casting method. They could generate magic out of thin air and supply it to a practitioner. It was unlike anything the three had seen. If magic can be produced from nothing, then perhaps one could avoid magic debt, Madame Shangdu breathed. Their glances met again. If Gowley had indeed designed a way to create magic independent of inheritance, then an obvious implication followed. Gowley Wayne could become the next Lord of Magic, someone whispered. Gowley smiled, not haughty but confident. You can see the obvious problem. I currently lack an initial spark to activate this. With that, I could become a magician by harnessing phantom demons. I haven't handed you every detail yet, so I'll explain. He paced slowly, explaining the theory. Normally, even with a phantom demon producing magic, a magician must possess some magic to form a feedback cycle with the phantom demon. That cycle induces the phantom demon to generate magic. But I've refined the idea. By integrating a phantom demon with myself, magically binding it, I can receive its magic even without having any magic of my own. Gao Li admitted his inspiration, Cao Zhen Qingren's Infinity Magician Ring, which had come about after Cao had lost his magician powers and later regained them. The ring had been a unique case born of desperation. An early artificial phantom demon had been used in the process, something the original researcher, Dimuzhou, never intended as a template. Dimuzhou considered phantom demons dangerous, an external tool to be used, not integrated, Gao Li said. But I learned from that and pushed further. Over the past 6 months, I didn't just copy his approach, I extended it. I found a way to integrate a phantom demon with myself. The result is a method that would allow me to acquire magic without inheriting another person's debt. Constantine, Zatanna, and Madame Shangdu were all suddenly serious, their earlier dismissiveness gone. How do you want us to cooperate? Constantine asked. It's simple in principle, Gao Li replied. First, I collect a small amount of each of your magic to artificially create a phantom demon. That phantom demon will produce magic stones. Using those stones, I'll fashion a request magician ring and use it to draw magic from the artificial phantom demon into myself. In effect, I'll become both a gate and a temporary magician. The phantom demon, though artificial, contains magic, and the request ring can draw some magic from external sources. When I pull the phantom demon's magic into me, I'll be a gate with magic and an incomplete magician, enough to meet the conditions for integration. He continued calmly. Yes, the arrangement is imperfect. It won't be a stable full magician cycle, and the system will have flaws. I may not immediately be able to cast every spell, but all I need at first is the formal status of a magician. It's essentially replicating Cao Zhen Qingren's plight and solution. He became a gate and a magician, lacked a phantom demon at first, and then in despair found a path that led to integration with a phantom demon and a new form, infinity. The key to integrating with a phantom demon's magic is to achieve the status of magician, lose it, and then, from the depths of despair, overcome it and reach hope. So the plan is to use the artificial phantom demon's magic to initiate the ritual, force myself into that despair, and thereby birth my own phantom demon. The moment I successfully defeat despair and gain hope, my phantom demon will be tamed and become a source of magic, directly integrating with my magic. Chapter 20. A Prophecy That Failed and Succeeded. 2023-08-20. At first, Madame Shangdu, Constantine, and Zatanna had lingered mostly because of the Wayne family's money. Now curiosity was the stronger motive. They were fascinated by a completely new magic system. There was also a practical angle for magicians. If they could befriend the new Lord of Magic, could they safely borrow that power? This wasn't wishful thinking. The title Lord of Magic would not be granted by anyone. It would be a recognition from the universe itself. If Gao Li's magic system formally manifested, and it was truly novel, bearing no shared origin with any existing cosmic power, it would be recorded in the Sea of Laws. In effect, the DC universe would recognize Gao Li, and he could ascend in one step to become the master of a fundamentally new power. This is something that hasn't happened in at least 10,000 years, maybe 100,000, or even 1,000,000, Madame Shangdu murmured, excitement breaking through her usually composed facade. The various cosmic powers had been parceled out to their masters since ancient times. New, masterless powers were nearly unheard of. The three of them realized what they needed to do was help Gao Li become a formal magician so that this power could truly emerge. Over the next 3 months, Alfred watched the unusual household go from worrying Gao Li might be falling into a cult to having their worldviews shaken, and finally to a kind of stunned incomprehension. Even Alfred, competent, knowledgeable, unflappable, was bewildered by magic he had never seen. It didn't take much convincing to make him believe. Zatanna only needed to show off. A 4-element storm that instantly drenched the lawn was not a parlor trick. It proved real magic. Finally, the day all preparations were complete arrived. The 114514 model Magic Stone Biofabricator is checked and ready for use, Gao Li announced, looking at the fist-sized piece of flesh with tubes connected to it and exhaling in relief. That was difficult. I wanted it without self-awareness, but still to meet all the characteristics of a phantom demon. Luckily, it worked. Wait, isn't this a crystal condensed from input magic? Constantine asked, cigarette between his lips. Why would it have self-awareness? How many times have I told you, no smoking in the lab? Gao Li swatted the cigarette away and explained, because the input magic was transformed by my device into alien magic. Alien magic, new magic, Constantine said. And you said both this magic and phantom demon formation are tied to emotions? Exactly. Under extreme despair, this new magic can be affected and condense into a phantom demon. A phantom demon born of emotion will naturally have emotions of its own. Zatanna frowned. Isn't that creating life? That's not necessarily a bad thing. Why avoid it? Gao Li shoved his hands into the coat pockets and took a slow bite of the pocky stick dangling from his mouth. Creating life is a serious ethical issue. It might not even pass an ethics committee. That aside, I prefer phantom demon not to be born as a living thing, he continued. If a phantom demon originates from despair, its nature will be corrupt. It could harm humanity later. Madame Shangdu leaned forward, concern in her voice. Worry about yourself instead. Are you really performing this experiment yourself? As you said, a magician in this system who fails to overcome despair becomes a phantom demon and dies. The risk is enormous. Gao Li's expression tightened. He glanced around and lowered his voice. Don't say that in front of Alfred. He doesn't know a failed experiment could end like that. It'd be terrible if he heard. Zatanna laughed. He's your butler, and you're the young master. How can a young master be afraid of his butler? Gao Li's neck went stiff. This isn't fear, it's respect. Do you even know what respect is? Respecting your butler is noble, Zatanna teased, but fear. Feeling their amused stares, Gao Li cleared his throat and changed the subject. Madam, if you're really worried, why don't you divine the outcome? I can pay. Madame Shangdu shook her head. I already tried privately. I couldn't see anything. You're shrouded in a kind of chaotic mist. Gao Li wasn't surprised. If even the Ancient One of the Sorcerer Supreme's caliber had trouble seeing his future, it was unsurprising that Shangdu couldn't. "Still, I'll pay," he said, generous as ever. Shangdu smiled. "Thank you, but not being able to predict you is itself an auspicious omen." "How so?" "I can't foresee beings of a higher ontological rank than myself without paying a great price," she explained. "A master of a brand new power would clearly rank above me." Gao Li grinned. "Then I'll accept that as a blessing. Let's begin." He took out the Wizard Driver, technically a Wizard Driver Pro Max Plus, built to Wise Driver specifications and pushed to peak performance. In the original timeline, Dimu Zhao wouldn't have so foolishly created his own rival, so the Wise Driver outperformed the Wizard Driver. Gao Li, however, intended to max out everything and avoid repeating Cao Jenkingren's accident, steering the design along Wizard Driver lines. Constantine, Zatanna, and Madame Shangdu each took a position, forming an equilateral triangle around Gao Li. A simplified Witch's Sabbath circle was drawn beneath them. Because the ritual only needed to force one person into despair rather than affect a city, it didn't require eclipse conditions or 4 sacrifices. Once in place, Gao Li's request magic ring activated and the circle glowed. "Humph! Ah!" Gao Li's face contorted in pain as his consciousness dove into his inner world. Chapter 21, Steins Gate 2023-0820. This is... Gao Li blinked and found himself standing in the laboratory where he and Tony had parted that day. He was back in the Marvel Universe. At least, that's what it looked like. For a moment he wondered if he'd truly returned or if he was still inside his mind. He couldn't hold on to the thought for long. Events followed with the dizzying unreality of a dream. Memories slipped away faster and faster. Like a dreamer who has no awareness of dreaming, Gao Li kept forgetting he was in a ritual. After a few seconds, he reached up and asked himself, confused, "Why am I just standing here?" The world flipped, and the Ancient One pulled him into the mirror dimension. What followed was an extended period of debate and bargaining. Ancient One and Gao Li argued philosophies and tactics, and eventually Ancient One agreed to let Gao Li search for a way to save the world without destroying himself. They didn't fight. Ancient One simply sent Gao Li back to the real world. That night, he woke Tony in a panic and told him everything. Tony was half skeptical but ultimately listened, partly because a bald man had stepped through a ring of fire to vouch for Gao Li. "If I'm an absolute fixed point in time, couldn't I just recreate this experience myself?" Tony proposed. Both Ancient One and Gao Li shook their heads in unison. "No," they said. "If you knew about it in advance, your state of mind would change, and if you died trying to replicate it, we'd lose the fixed point." Tony thought it over and had to admit they were right. So they set about finding other methods. They worked without rest, discarding countless plans. Then, without any warning, the timeline screamed in silence. The universe began to collapse. Wherever Gao Li looked, black voids opened and spread outward. It was happening everywhere. Tony was torn apart before Gao Li's eyes and fell weakly to the ground. "This is the world collapsing?" Tony's voice was shredded with disbelief. Gao Li felt only ice. For a long time, he couldn't articulate a response. "We failed? We failed!" "No, I failed!" A ring of fire split open the air in front of Gao Li, and the Ancient One staggered through, shrouded in the green glow of the Time Stone. "I shouldn't have trusted you," she spat. "If I hadn't trusted you, it wouldn't have come to this." Ancient One's fury snapped something in Gao Li. He clung to the one idea he could, a desperate, grasping solution. "You said you could control time, reverse time, and return the world to how it was." Ancient One's anger curdled into bitterness. "It's useless. The Eye of Agamotto draws power from the Time Stone, and as an Infinity Stone, all its powers depend on this universe. In other words, once the Time Stone leaves this universe, it's just a pretty rock. That's what's happening now. The Time Stone is losing power." Her words proved true. The green light from the Time Stone sputtered and died, and Ancient One was swallowed by the void. How could this happen? Gao Li's lips moved. Then, lightning quick, an idea struck him. He could go back in time. He hadn't used the Kamen Rider Chronos experience card since he'd met Ancient One and committed himself to research. Now, with the world collapsing, he activated it. Transform. In a universe burning under two-toned flame, Gao Li became a black and green savior and poured every ounce of energy into one action. Reset. The world blazed, and the hands of time reversed. Gao Li rewound everything back to the moment just after he'd reached an agreement with Ancient One. The Chronos card reset to unused. Time had been rewound. This time he swore he wouldn't tell Tony the whole truth. He'd find a way to make Tony replicate his original experience without revealing everything. He and Ancient One adjusted the plan and tried again. It failed. Just as in that parallel universe, Tony failed to become the Iron Man pivotal to the original timeline. The presence of Gao Li seemed to create a new absolute fixed point that resisted change. Gao Li reset time again. Tony invented his suit, but still behaved like a playboy billionaire, not the driven hero the original fixed point required. No, he can't become the cornerstone this way. It's only a false fixed point. The Ancient One's voice was laced with despair as the universe began to fall apart again. Reset. Gao Li transformed, rewound time, replanned, and failed once more. Reset. Again and again he tried. Transform, reset, reconfigure, fail. The same pattern repeated, each attempt collapsing into the same ultimate failure. Reset. Damn it, why isn't this working again? Reset. How could this accident keep happening? Reset. Damn it, this can't be happening. Reset. Over and over. Gao Li had lost count of how many times he'd been thrown back. No matter what plan he devised, some unpredictable factor would ruin it, and he'd fail. If he transformed into Kamen Rider Chronos earlier, could he muscle through those disasters with raw power? But the trial card only transformed once. He had to reserve Chronos as the last trump, the one tool to activate the reset after a failure. Gao Li's hands trembled so badly he could barely hold the whiteboard marker. Which reset was this now? 378th? Had he already passed 400? No, there are too many repeated memories. My head's starting to blur. He forced himself to calm down and began sketching another plan on the board. This one might work. Wait, did I try this before? I can't tell anymore. It feels like I have and like I haven't. He'd only just steadied when he started tearing at his hair. What should I do? Note, since many plot lines and settings in DC Comics contradict each other, I'll adjust characters, settings, and timelines as needed. This world is a fusion of comics and movies. Think of it as a parallel universe setting. Chapter 22, Yinglong, You Bastard, 2020 through 820. At the edge of Gao Li's mental world, a massive phantom demon in the shape of a Yinglong watched him with cold amusement. Soon, it murmured. Soon, once he's utterly broken, I can be truly born. The Yinglong phantom demon shifted into the form of a bald monk, an Ancient One look-alike, with a sneer. Ancient One's revelation had started Gao Li's spiral. Appearing that way fit the demon's purpose as a personification of despair. Under that gaze, Gao Li, after a long, shivering pause, reluctantly went back to writing. It doesn't matter if I can't remember whether I used this plan. I have countless chances to start over. Let the repetition be repetition. The demon, watching, wasn't surprised by the attempt at self-reassurance. If Gao Li's spirit had been fragile enough to be broken quickly, a powerful phantom demon like him could never have taken root. Gao Li tried again to restore Tony's absolute time point, and failed, as always. Reset, plan, failure, reset, plan, failure, reset, plan, failure. The cycle ground on. Even Yinglong lost track of how many resets he'd seen. There were simply too many. As a phantom demon, he'd grown bored, boredom so intense it bordered on agony. Gao Li, resetting and changing things each attempt, never found it dull. But Yinglong was a spectator in a never-ending film. His boredom multiplied 100-fold. After so many cycles, he'd started to crack. Boredom, after all, is a cruelest torture. Lock someone in a silent, timeless place, and they'll break quicker than most suspects in a cold interrogation. Yinglong felt like he couldn't hold on much longer, but he thought this was the last stretch. Surely the next collapse would finish Gao Li off, and he would be born. With a flash of white light, Yinglong stepped into Gao Li's presence, taking Ancient One's guise. Gao Li, that's enough. I've seen countless timelines, and your failures 1,000 times over. You cannot save both. Gao Li stared back for a long beat. Finally, he asked, "This world isn't real, is it? You're not Ancient One." "What did you say?" the demon answered, feigning surprise, but his heart stuttered. Gao Li ignored him. "In all my cycles, I always return to the moment right after making a deal with Ancient One. Ancient One never comes at the start to tell me it won't work. If Ancient One could have warned me after seeing all these failed timelines, she would have done it long ago. And if she wanted to stop me, a decisive death would have been better than a lecture. Yinglong faltered, then continued to play his role. Gao Li pressed on. Ancient One said she couldn't see my future. So how do you know I failed so many times? Maybe you'll claim you saw the timeline's destruction, not me. But what if someone else destroys it? The demon's breathing grew heavy. Veins stood out against his forehead. Gao Li kept going. I've suspected for a while this world is fake. When I reset, the one-time trial card resets to unused. How could the system be so generous unless it's a flaw in a simulation? I can't prove it. If you were really Ancient One, I could just reset so you never heard this. But you aren't. Something snapped inside Yinglong. Even if this world is fake, so what? After everything you've gone through, don't you get it? You can't save both. If you try to live, the universe is destroyed by your selfishness. And if the world is destroyed, can you survive alone? You will die either way. This is your fate. No matter how you struggle, it will always end like this. After that tirade, Yinglong felt a rush of relief. That's it. Stand at the brink and fall into despair. A rational man like you must have seen it himself, so despair completely. Gao Li's face drained of color. He couldn't find words for a long, stunned moment. The marker clattered to the floor. He swayed as if struck. The whole world is fake? He bit his lip until tears slipped down his cheeks. Yinglong smirked. You finally realize this is a simulation of the real world. The only end is your death. Damn it, it's actually fake. Yinglong hovered, suddenly unsure. Yes, but you say that like it's nothing, you bastard. Do you know how disappointed I am? So disappointed I'm crying. Gao Li's voice rose. I'd thought this was a paradise. If the world could loop infinitely, I'd have endless time to learn, to experiment, to blow up priceless equipment if necessary, to run the biggest, most dangerous tests, even those that would be unethical in the real world, and then just reset it away. I could probe alien knowledge from countless civilizations across the Marvel cosmos. I'd have infinite funds, infinite test grounds. I could spend a lifetime learning things no one could learn in a single life. Yinglong gaped. Do you hear yourself? You sound worse than I do. And I remember the Marvel Universe has so many alien civilizations, guardians of the galaxy and the like. The knowledge on those planets is the kind of thing a person could never see in one lifetime. But if the world loops, but if the world is fake, none of that is real. The data would be worthless, the knowledge illusory. My paradise just vanished. Gao Li grabbed Yinglong by the collar. You bastard, how are you going to make this up to me? Chapter 23, I Am the Last Hope. 2023-08-20, confronted by that furious surge, Yinglong, who had felt powerful and helpless in turns, suddenly felt small. Compared to that, what about the Marvel Universe? Don't you even care about that? After repeating so many times, surely you can't have it both ways, Yinglong managed weakly. Gao Li narrowed his eyes, snorted, and let the demon go. I never meant I wouldn't consider the world's destruction. I simply refuse to consider whether I can save both. You don't even care about the world being destroyed? This is an infinitely harder choice than a trolley problem. Gao Li smiled, a tired, confident curve. When I say I won't consider saving both, I don't mean I'm indifferent. I mean I won't let suspicion about my abilities stop me. I will find a way eventually. If I don't have confidence in myself, then what's the point? He straightened, eyes burning. I'll keep trying until I succeed. I'll be the last hope. Section 16 Yinglong was stunned for a moment, then exploded. This is baseless blind faith, arrogant self-confidence born of conceit. How can it be baseless? Gao Li smiled faintly. My foundation is my trust in science. I never waver in that belief. That's the same thing, Yinglong roared. Faith in science is still blind faith. I can't believe you'd say something so shallow. Where has your reason gone? Science can't explain everything. Technology has limits. Magic exists in the world, and it has nothing to do with science. You just don't want to admit you might fail. Gao Li watched Yinglong pace. So agitated his dragon horns were even beginning to sprout, but he didn't get angry. Speaking of magic, he said slowly, that word almost makes me remember the whole story. After all, I recreated magic by technological means. I made phantom demons through technology. How can those be unrelated? But the answer is simple. Technology has limits, but science does not. Gao Li met Yinglong's eyes. What do you think science is? What do you mean? Science is just science, isn't it? Yinglong snapped, unsettled. Gao Li shook his head. I'm asking about the essence of science. In the past, humans held many wrong theories, limited by the knowledge of their time, yet those ideas were still called science in their era. Even now, supposedly settled science is constantly revised. Think of the age of the universe, once accepted as 13.8 billion years, then challenged by the discovery of a 14.46 billion-year-old star, Methuselah, forcing recalculations to 26.7 billion years. That could be overturned again. Science is a history of hypotheses, tests, corrections. It's a process, gathering knowledge, proposing theories, verifying through trial and error, correcting mistakes, and getting closer to truth. It applies to everything, every phenomenon in the universe. That's why I could replicate magic with science. He recalled the witch's banquet, the way his spiritual world had begun to fracture, how he and Yinglong stood on a void that was collapsing. Yinglong's voice trembled. Look at your surroundings. This scene predicts your future. You'll fail, and countless people will die. Don't you feel any compassion? Don't you despair? Gao Li's voice was steady. Science isn't technology. Science is the method of advancing knowledge. Even if a thing seems impossible now, if I find the right method and the right theory, it becomes knowledge to use. An absolute time point. If I can figure it out, it will be a tool, a cornerstone of the timeline, a stepping stone to higher levels. That's romantic. He spread his arms as if embracing that idea. I'm not purely rational. I'm full of feeling, too. I can sense a romance unique to the pursuit of science. Under that romance, how could I despair? I will never give up. My hope never vanished. I'll say it again. I will save the world, and I will save myself. If I can't do it now, it's only a darkness before dawn. I haven't found the method yet. I will not be defeated by despair, because science itself is built step by step from failures. The morning sun of hope will always come. As his words rang out, the radiance around Gao Li brightened until he seemed to glow. No, he truly radiated light. That light struck Yinglong like spring sun melting winter snow, making the dragon feel burning hot. This light is... Yinglong's pupils narrowed. How can this be? Countless reincarnations didn't break him. Instead, what if it's just an absolute time point? Gao Li breathed. If I keep exploring, someday it will be mine to use at will. Not only a foundation of the timeline, but a path to a higher plane. Isn't that romantic? No, Yinglong cried out, but the light of hope surged and overwhelmed him. Boom! In the real world, at the center of the magic circle, Gao Li erupted in a fierce magical reaction. A towering pillar of light blasted outward, knocking Constantine, Zatanna, and others back. The beam shot into the sky, tore through the storm clouds above Gotham, and for the first time in a long while, sunlight fell on the city of sin. What's happening? Someone exclaimed. Did he succeed? What is that? They all felt the impossibly dense magic hanging in the air. Earlier, when Gao Li had been crying, they had thought him broken by despair. None of them expected such a world-shaking phenomenon so soon after. A diamond-bright Yinglong burst from Gao Li's body, circling above Wayne Manor. Dragon roars rolled across the sky as the mythical beast took form, its vast wings casting a shadow over the grounds. Everyone present was stunned. P.S. Thanks to Jatian Gang's upright perverted old man for the 500-point reward. Chapter 24, Shocking the Universe, 2023-08-20. At the same time, Gao Li's tears crystallized into a glittering magic ring, and a chant rose in the air. Unlimitedness. 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 Gao Li woke on the spot, staring at the ring on his hand. Unlimitedness? Not infinity? My driver has higher specs, and the phantom demon inside me is different. A variance in the magic ring might be normal. He lifted his eyes to the Yinglong circling the sky and smiled as he slipped the magic ring onto the driver. Transform. Unlimitedness, please, the driver intoned on its own, chanting the spell. The diamond Yinglong dove into Gao Li, guiding the power through the magic circle. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth, all-encompassing Yinglong. When the incantation ended, a completely new rider stood before them. Armor like cut diamonds, opulent, priestly robes, and a presence of night magic so profound it stunned them all. This is an entirely new magic system. Constantine's eyes widened so far he forgot to draw on his cigarette. Zatanna's gaze glittered. She loved gems, and Gowlie's attire fit her tastes perfectly. "You actually did it," Shangdu Madam said, eyes shining. "I can feel the Sea of Law's resonance. You have become a lord of magic. Although I don't fully understand the Sea of Laws, I feel some subtle, ineffable connection to it," Gowlie murmured, delight in his voice. "Let me name it. Anyone who masters this power and becomes a magic wielder can transform into a Kamen Rider. Let's call it night magic." And because the abilities, Phantom Demon and Driver, differ slightly from known systems, this new form will be called Kamen Rider Wizard, Endless Style. At the moment Gowlie named it, his link to the Sea of Laws tightened. Night magic registered itself as a new constituent force of the universe, and the Sea of Laws reverberated violently. Heaven, the Silver City. The archangels Michael and Raphael, presiding over the angelic council, felt the cosmic disturbance. They exchanged surprised, uncertain glances. "A new power has been born? Do we inform the Lord?" They hesitated. From what they understood, the Lord would likely be interested in a new power. Yet to speculate further felt dangerously presumptuous. In the heavens below, Zeus's expression turned serious, even amid his revelry. "Did you feel that? A night magic entirely unrelated to Hecate has been born." Originally, all night magic and magic in the universe were thought to originate from Hecate. That belief had led the gods to conspire to imprison her to monopolize magic's power. If Hecate were ever free and demanded repayment of that magic debt, even mighty gods like Zeus and Odin would be helpless. That's why a new, independent lord of magic shocked the gods. Odin, seated in Asgard, gripped his throne. "Hope of escaping Ragnarok has appeared," he murmured. Ragnarok, the prophecy of the pantheon's demise, likely stemmed from the magic debt's consequences. A new lord of magic, completely unrelated to Hecate and embodying a self-contained system, had been born, and that gave Odin reason to hope. Yet he could not see who the new lord of magic was. "Why can I not perceive them?" he wondered. Not even Darkseid, one of the new gods and among the most powerful in the universe, could trace the source of the disturbance. He considered the possibility that this being's status or power surpassed his own, but dismissed it as unlikely. Only creator-level entities could surpass him. Still, he could not see through the mist around Gowlie, a phenomenon that applied even in the DC universe. Even the Infinity Stones could not pierce that veil. OA, Green Lantern Corps headquarters. The Guardians, usually outside the purview of magic, detected another alarming change. "The emotional energies behind the source wall are stirring," one reported. "How is that possible? Has a new emotional spectrum been born?" "No, the number of emotional energy classifications should be fixed. That's the conclusion of hundreds of billions of years of research." They were baffled. It was a change that shook the foundations of the universe. The source wall, boundary of the multiverse, separates the DC multiverse from the greater omniverse and holds immeasurable secrets. Gowlie's night magic, born as despair, transmuted into hope, resonated with traits of emotional energy and tapped into the emotional energy pool, one of the universe's fundamental components. "We can't locate the source. Send the Green Lantern Corps to investigate." Even the Guardians had to admit defeat. They couldn't identify the cause. Back in Gotham, Gowlie had no idea his breakthrough had disturbed gods, new gods, and cosmic guardians. He had no energy to care. Eyes closed, feeling the endless form hum within him, pure, wild joy filled him. Chapter 25, Enemy of Mages, Bane of Night Magic, 2023-0820. Before the experiment, Gowlie had expected this new power to be stronger than the original Kamen Rider Wizard, Infinity Style. Two reasons supported his expectation. First, both his Phantom Demon and his Driver were different from Kaogen Chingren's originals. He had built the Wizard Driver to the highest specifications, making its performance nearly identical to the Wise Driver. The Wise Driver's capability was legendary. Kamen Rider Wiseman, using it, could hold his own against the final form of Kamen Rider Wizard, Endless Style, even in his basic form. Second, the world mechanisms were different. The universe Gowlie drew from for Kamen Rider Wizard lacked some higher-level magic mechanisms, but the DC universe contained complementary mechanisms that could be triggered and would amplify the power. Shangdu Madam had told Gao Li that beyond the stages of apprentice and magic master, there were still higher ranks. For example, Zatanna's father was a magic master, a title denoting a pinnacle for ordinary magic users, yet it was not the end of the path. The DC universe contained systems and mechanisms that could elevate a magic user far beyond conventional limits, and Gao Li's new night magic, fused with the peculiarities of his driver and phantom demon, had the potential to tap into those mechanisms. After comprehending special laws and being recognized by the universe's will into the sea of laws, one could cultivate to the realm of a law god, a path to achieving godhood while retaining a human body, like the legendary Shazam wizard. Gao Li had sketched a crude hierarchy to map it out. If the night magic system followed the same tiers, using magic untransformed would be like a magic apprentice. The basic transformed state would be an ordinary magician. The enhanced or final forms would correspond to magic masters. He hadn't expected to reach something comparable to an actual god. Then a higher-level cosmic mechanism, one even Madame Shangdu hadn't known about, altered everything. Resonating with the sea of laws already met the standard for becoming a god, a step beyond a mere magic master. More importantly, law gods were born when their special laws entered the sea of laws. Gao Li hadn't entered it with a single law, but with an entire magic system filled with countless special laws. On top of that, he had become the new Lord of Magic. The universe's origin recognized that status, and it reflected back. Endless Form's abilities were amplified to a staggering degree. Under his mask, Gao Li couldn't hide his grin. He remembered the debates he'd read in forums during a past life about Infinite Form. Many fans insisted Infinite Form was completely immune to physical damage, even though the official material never explicitly said so. The show's presentation made a strong impression. Infinite Form was almost never penetrated. The rare exceptions involved attacks saturated with powerful magic, like a kick linked to the White Wizard or Gremlin, bolstered by the Philosopher's Stone. Those weren't pure physical strikes. In combat, Cao Zhangqinggren, who knew Infinite style well, tended to focus on deflecting magical attacks and often ignored purely physical ones. Even when Gremlin, infused with the Philosopher's Stone, pummeled Infinite style with physical blows, there were only sparks, no signs of serious injury. Gao Li couldn't be certain whether Infinite style was truly immune to physical damage, but Endless style was something else entirely. It could be genuinely 100% immune to magic attacks. That was its defining feature. Kamen Rider Wizard has a metal called sorcerium, he thought, a magic-derived metal that absorbs impacts and nullifies magic attacks. Sorcerium's coverage and limits were small, though. Endless style refined that concept and materialized it across his entire body, granting total defense against magical force. As he analyzed the sensations of the power flooding through him, his excitement swelled. After the resonance feedback with the Sea of Laws, this had become an absolute, conceptual-level defense. Any magic power or magical force would be directly nullified by Endless Style's armored magic robe. From now on, he felt like he was the daddy of all magicians. "How does it feel?" Zatanna asked, curious. Gao Li paused, then broke into song instead. How lonely is invincibility. How empty is invincibility. Alone at the peak, the cold wind keeps blowing. My loneliness, who can understand me? Zatanna went silent. Madame Shangdu and Constantine looked mildly speechless. Gao Li was getting carried away. They didn't yet know the full extent of Endless Form. Madame Shangdu, warned only by their relatively new acquaintance, offered practical advice. Whether you're truly invincible or not, try to use this magic as little as possible around outsiders. This magic? Gao Li touched the Endless Magician ring. You mean the transformation into Endless mode? Madame Shangdu nodded. Yes, your form, as the magic that officially introduces night magic to the world, is highly recognizable. Top powerhouses could identify the aura and the identity of the Lord of Magic from it. You don't yet fully understand how weighty that position is. Countless people will covet night magic. It could bring you endless trouble. Gao Li grinned. I see. Fine. We'll keep it secret. Let's sign a confidentiality agreement first, and I'll give everyone $10 million in hush money. Madame Shangdu's eyes widened. Constantine raised an eyebrow. Gao Li continued, more seriously. But don't worry, those who would covet the lordship of night magic would come from the magic side. If they're magic enemies, I'm not afraid. A chill behind him cut the boast short. Endless style could block magic, but it couldn't stop the black chi and the coldness drifting from the doorway. Young Master Gao Li, I heard a lot of commotion here. Were you conducting some dangerous experiment behind my back? Alfred's voice came from behind him, politely smiling but clearly suspicious. Gao Li stiffened, turned, and saw Alfred's smile was all business. Haha, Alfred, you're overthinking. Calling it a dangerous experiment is presumptuous. That's guilt before proof. Alfred replied calmly, You never avoid me for ordinary experiments. That's why this one looks fishy. Gao Li tried to signal the others with a wink. Help me out, give me a false testimony, but the mask hid his gestures. Even if they'd been visible, Zatanna, Constantine, and Madame Shangdu had already slipped away. Gao Li scowled inwardly. Traitors. The next day, at the meeting of the 4 officially recognized magicians, Gao Li announced, indignant, I petitioned Alfred for permission to do practical exercises with you all, and he refused. He slapped the table for emphasis. He must have seen me getting stronger in Wayne Manor and rejected it on purpose. Zatanna, sitting across from him, bit her tongue. Petition? For a butler? And wasn't Wayne Manor already his property? Xiaojia, Gao Li noticed her expression. Don't you agree? If not, bring me his head. Zatanna blinked. At that moment, Alfred wheeled in a cart with black tea and pastries and asked politely, Young Master Gao Li, what are you discussing? Gao Li adopted an exaggeratedly solemn tone. I said Alfred is getting old. The others exchanged looks. Under Alfred's watchful supervision, there was no brawl. It wouldn't have changed anything anyway. Madame Shangdu and Constantine weren't frontline fighters in the way duels required. Zatanna, while powerful, was only just within reach of the magic master realm. They parted amicably. Madame Shangdu left with a generous reward and no need to open her divination shop for at least a year. Constantine lingered at the gates of Wayne Manor, lighting a cigarette. Is your new power really strong? Gao Li hedged. I can't tell you details, but it's a specialized counter to the magic side. Special counter? It's very effective against magic, Gao Li explained. As the ancients said, restraint is paramount. Special attacks can fell gods. Constantine stared for a beat. Which ancients? And do Americans even have ancients? He shrugged. Fine. I won't take your hush money. I'll keep your secret, but I might need your help someday. I get into trouble. I specialize in unorthodox solutions. Gao Li shot back fast. Then I'll give you the money. Constantine looked confused. Gao Li laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. I'm kidding. Take the hush money. If you need help later, I'll help without hesitation. We've become friends. Friends help each other for free, right? Constantine was touched, though also a little annoyed at the assessment. After he left, Zatanna returned, hesitating. Gao Li, I don't need the hush money, but could you help me with something? Wait, Gao Li interrupted. Let me guess. Constantine asked you for favors too? Zatanna blinked. He did? Same answer. You and I are friends. Hush money or not, I'll help. Thank you, Gao Li. Zatanna's eyes watered a little as she hugged him. She asked him to use Wayne Group's influence to help find her father, Gay Wani. It was a simple request. Gao Li instructed Alfred to start inquiries and waved her off. Back in his room, Gao Li opened the system interface. Becoming the Lord of Magic had increased his influence. The system gave him a new S-rank draw and an SS rank draw. He'd alerted many forces in the universe, but only startled them. They didn't even know who the Lord of Magic was yet, so no immediate backlash followed. He made 2 consecutive draws. The first read, development data for the Victory Hypergun and its ammunition. His eyes lit up. The Victory Hypergun, more powerful than the TAC gun. From the Earth Defense Organization's Victory team in Ultraman Titan, the defense teams in that series always carried black technology wonders like palm-sized gravity-free bullets that could fell even Zetan. With tech like that, taking out a Kryptonian with a single shot wouldn't be fantasy. The second reward was a small but intriguing skill. Skill, Cosmic Skater. Once per day, randomly teleports the user to any area. Gao Li smirked. Am I Ultraman Dyna? The randomness made him wary, so he tossed the Cosmic Skater aside mentally and dove into the hypergun schematics. Before he could get deep, Alfred returned with news, smiling but measured. Young Master Bruce contacted me. He said he can't return right now. He'll be out of contact for a while. He promised that once his business is done, he'll come back to Gotham as soon as possible. He misses you. Gowley waved it off. You don't have to worry. I was a little absent-minded before. Bruce and I aren't that close. I'm closer to you, Alfred. Alfred blinked, then chuckled and shook his head. When you say it like that, it does make sense. I was too excited earlier. I apologize. I took things for granted. After Alfred left, Gowley sat with his thoughts. Wayne Industries was a powerful resource, funding, equipment, influence. But it was both his and Bruce's. That reality settled on him as he returned to the hypergun blueprints and the new responsibilities of being the Lord of Magic. Section 18, Chapter 27, Lex Luthor's Fury, 2023-08-20. That meant that while young Master Gowley was using Wayne Industries' resources, all of his research and achievements were completely visible to Bruce, Batman. I've heard Batman opposes this plan or that plan. In some universes, he even leaked his own database. Maybe that's paranoid, but from a security standpoint, I can't let all my trump cards be exposed. It looked like creating his own private force was inevitable. When Bruce had said he would be out of contact, perhaps he'd gone to train and gain experience with that mysterious League of Shadows. If so, his return to Gotham would surely mark the birth of Batman. Thinking that through, Gowley made up his mind. There's still time to operate. I'm out. This was the opening he'd been waiting for, and a chance to fulfill the dream he'd carried since the Marvel Universe, to found a company. Grow it bigger and stronger, civilianize Kamen Rider technology, help countries around the world, help all of humanity. That should create enough influence. As he'd told Tony before, Gowley didn't want Kamen Rider tech used in wars to serve the ambitions of the powerful. It should protect and benefit humanity. Only then could he feel, as a scientist, that he hadn't wasted the knowledge he'd brought from other worlds. That night, he sketched a business plan and talked it through with Alfred. He knew he couldn't completely hide things from Wayne's butler, and he didn't intend to. This wasn't a secret scheme. If you've made up your mind, I'll support you fully, Alfred said. Despite his obvious reluctance, Alfred obeyed his master's will once the decision was made. Don't worry, I won't go to a city that's too far. We'll meet again. Gowley smiled and took Alfred's hand like a grandson holding an elder's, feeling its warmth, the wrinkles, the marks of time. To avoid Wayne Industries appearing as an investor, Gowley took a large sum as a personal loan and moved to another top-tier American metropolis comparable to Gotham, Metropolis. 6 months later, at the Fadian building, cars flowed beneath the tower, reporters clustered with cameras and microphones, and many invited guests filled the lobby. Fadian Group, founded and risen to prominence in only half a year, was holding its first Fadian Technology Expo. As attendees entered the hall, a soft electronic voice spoke directly in their ears, no headphones required, as if the announcement were whispered beside them. Everyone was stunned. Since the founding of Fadian Group, we've expanded rapidly in the market and achieved remarkable results in the civilian sector. Our G-Series guard acceleration sticks have become the preferred retractable electromagnetic batons of private security firms. The converter microgenerator outperforms other generators of the same size in power efficiency and offers ultra-high safety and stability, able to survive missile-level impacts and keep running. Our zero-emission fuel non-polluting fuel cells are entirely emission-free, align with current environmental concepts, and have earned multiple environmental certifications. Our silver-enhanced soft plastic has been widely adopted across industries, with large orders from many countries. That's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to our group's material science achievements. Astrium super-rigid metal can greatly increase the strength of a frame with a single vapor-deposited layer, and the much-anticipated helio metal can astonishingly amplify energy. It will shake the world when released. Besides civilianized tech inspired by Kamen Rider G3 and Kamen Rider Phase, Gowley had spent those 6 months getting a head start on the astronomical switch and extracting 2 astonishing new metals from it. With products so far ahead of competitors and the discreet backing of Wayne Group, which spared him countless headaches, Fadian Group had become one of the fastest-growing companies in the world. When the electronic presentation ended, the exhibit's star appeared. Under a flood of flashbulbs, a black-haired Asian man stepped to the top of the stage. Gao Li, who had altered his appearance using his transformation magic. Over the past 6 months, he had been diligently making and refining magic stones and had acquired a significant number of Magic Master rings. He had also considered returning to the Marvel Universe, but so far could only soul travel between worlds and hadn't found a way to bring the endless Magic Master rings back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you all know me, Gao Li, president of Fadian Group. He used the phonetic transcription of his Chinese name rather than the name Gori, since the difference in English is huge. The stage became an ocean of cameras. A reporter raised his hand. Mr. Gao, what do you think of Mr. Lex Luthor, who's often called one of Metropolis' twin stars alongside you? Gao Li waved to silence the noise. I've never heard of any twin stars of Metropolis title. LexCorp is just a shameless company that copies whatever Fadian releases immediately. It doesn't deserve to be mentioned beside us. The arrogant remark set off another flashbulb frenzy. The reporter, sensing a story, pressed on. But Mr. Luthor recently said that in terms of personal intelligence, only you can barely keep up with him. In fact, LexCorp's growth is second only to Fadian. Why the disdain for LexCorp? Gao Li shrugged. When Lex Luthor invents something truly original, instead of following my lead and imitating, then I'll consider looking him in the eye. Next question. Inside LexCorp Tower, a young man whose hair was thinning early watched the live broadcast and slammed the remote control onto his palm with a roar. How dare he look down on me? Bastard, I'll show him who the smartest person in the world is. Luthor had been arrogant since childhood. Of all the people he knew, almost none matched his intellect. He named his company Lex, rather than using his full surname to signal that everything he'd built was the product of his genius alone. Fadian Group's sudden rise, matching LexCorp's pace in only 6 months, forced him to take Gao Li seriously. And now, Gao Li had publicly insulted him. Luthor could barely contain his fury. Meanwhile, the expo ended successfully. Back in his office, Gao Li prepared to relax when Harley Quinn, the talented secretary he'd recruited, walked in. Boss, Wayne Group called. Oh, what did they say? Gao Li straightened. His ties to Wayne were confidential. Only Alfred contacted him publicly. Harley answered, they said they've located the whereabouts of Gi Wani, John Zatara. Chapter 28. Magic Masters gather in Gotham, 2023 at 0820. An anonymous source reported that several Magic Masters have gathered on the outskirts of Gotham, and there were eyewitnesses who recognized your father, John Zatara, Alfred told him. The next day, Gao Li called Zatanna over. She was ecstatic. Father's been a world-famous magician for years, performing everywhere. It's not surprising someone would recognize him. This eyewitness report is very credible. Gotham is my base. If Wayne Group says they found him, it's unlikely to be wrong. For someone active in the United States, it would be odd if Wayne couldn't locate him in half a year, Zatanna said. Wayne Group, after all, was one of the nation's 2 industrial behemoths, wielding enormous influence and resources. But all these Magic Masters gathering in Gotham makes me uneasy, Gao Li admitted. Do you know why they'd assemble? Zatanna shook her head. No. And if Father's fine, why hasn't he contacted me? I can't figure that out either. To gather so many Magic Masters, it must be for something important. Gotham really is trouble-prone, Gao Li sighed. Let's go. We'll take a look. Fadian Group's private jet waited. After arriving in Gotham, they hopped immediately into Wayne Group's car. These are the files Wayne Group collected, Alfred said, handing over a dossier. They seem to have come for this person. Gao Li skimmed the paper. Crispus Allen, former GCPD officer. Why would a cop be involved with the magic world? He was puzzled. Could the true magical heavyweights be sequestered in Gotham all along? Had he chased down Constantine and Madame Xanadu in vain? We'll find out when we get there. I'll ask Father directly. All right. Gao Li turned to Alfred. Please return right after we get out of the car. There could be a conflict. I don't want the aftermath to drag you in. Alfred's concern flared. Young Master Gao Li, is this too dangerous? If they prove hostile, I suggest hiring top assassins to neutralize them. Gao Li nearly choked. After learning about magic, you immediately look into assassins? How does that connect? He forced a laugh. As a former MI5 agent, his brain habitually sketched contingency plans. Alfred's reaction was predictably extreme. In any case, don't worry. Every magic master here will call me father. No magic master can hurt me. Zatanna murmured from the side. Then what should I call you? Daddy? Grandpa? I was using hyperbole, Xiaojia. Don't join in teasing me. Gao Li brushed his shoulder off. After much persuasion, Alfred agreed to leave. Gao Li and Zatanna walked toward a lone wooden cabin in the distance, isolated like a secluded retreat. They had taken only a few steps when Gao Li suddenly grabbed Zatanna's arm and pulled her back. Wait, there's a magic barrier. Really? Zatanna looked around. Surprised, she felt nothing. But Gao Li, now a lord of magic, was unusually sensitive to magical fluctuations and trusted his instincts. The barrier's constructed cleverly. It's probably the work of a master, or several masters collaborating. It's normal that you didn't sense it. He fitted 2 rings and slipped them onto his black-belted palm. He whispered the incantations. Fire, please. Connect, please. A fireball appeared and hovered in the air as a spatial magic circle linked to an unknown place. This connection spell won't let living beings pass fully, but non-living objects can. Barriers are usually weaker internally. Let's try. This was Gao Li's first time testing his own magic against the DC universes. He felt a pulse of nerves. Go. At his command, the fireball drilled through the spatial circle, appeared inside the barrier, and slammed into it, an internal strike. Inside the wooden cabin, the faces of several magic masters went pale. Someone breached our barrier. How is that possible? That was the power we cast together. And so fast, without any warning. A frontal assault would normally be difficult, but Gao Li had used a clever approach. Attack from the inside via spatial magic. The magic masters had, of course, set up spatial interceptions as part of the barrier, but those defenses were limited to their system's parameters, and Gao Li's method had found a way around that limitation. Section 19. When they all rushed outside, they were met by a deceptively calm Gao Li and Zatanna. I'm sorry, Gao Li said with an almost comical sincerity. I didn't expect the barrier to be that fragile. I only meant to test it, then I accidentally broke it. The magic masters had to force themselves not to rough him up. Xiaojia, how did you find your way here? Jaywani asked, eyes widening as he recognized Zatanna. Pain and disbelief crossed his face. I should be asking you. You disappeared without a word and left me behind. Jaywani rubbed his forehead in frustration. There's a reason I did it. I was protecting you. But now you. Enough, Jaywani. The trench-coated man beside him intervened gently. Since your daughter has come looking for you, you can't avoid her any longer. Why not be frank? Jaywani sighed and relented. All right, come in. Inside, the small house held more people than had gone outside. On the couch sat a disheveled man who hadn't left with them, Crispus Allen, just as the intelligence reports had said. Jaywani went through introductions with a resigned, controlled voice. This is Master Ochi, Deadman Boston, Dr. Fate Kent, Phantom Stranger. Even those who weren't titled magic masters were renowned figures in the occult community. Then Jaywani turned his glare on Gao Li, as if looking at a pig dared to root among his cabbages. Who are you, kid? I'm Gao Li Wayne, Gao Li said bluntly. Coming into my family's territory without knowing the master's name, that's rude for a guest, isn't it? Jaywani was stunned. If Gao Li really was of the Wayne family, the rebuke had weight. The Waynes were practically Gotham royalty. No one outside the circle knew about Gao Li's connection, and Zatanna's silence made it likely true. So you're Wayne family then, but I've never heard of anyone from the Waynes practicing magic. Master Ochi smiled softly, and Gao Li didn't press it further. Since you've come to Gotham and seem to be looking for our police, we have a right to know what you're doing. The magic masters exchanged looks. Phantom Stranger stepped forward. Since you're a magician yourself, you must have heard of the Spectre. The Spectre? Gao Li blinked. A ghost? Then look in the graveyard. Moke shook his head. Not that kind of specter. The Spectre is the code name for a great presence. The Spectre is the wrath of God, the embodiment of the Master's anger. It needs a host, and this generation's host is Crispus Allen. Him? The wrath of God? Gao Li looked at Allen with skepticism. Allen looked more like a drunk than a divine avatar. He only became the host not long ago, Moke explained. The master's wrath is not easy to accommodate. That's why he's like this. Moke's knowledge came from being part of the same celestial faction as the Spectre. Along with Pandora, who opened the magic box, and the Questioner, he was one of the so-called three incarnations of original sin. The name Moke might be unfamiliar, but one of his past identities was Judas, the world-famous traitor. He'd been the Master's covert agent for Heaven. Zatanna ignored the lore and turned to her father. "Father, why did you abandon me and disappear like that?" Gaywani looked tired. "We're here to find the Spectre. You must understand there is an unimaginably terrifying enemy involved. To keep you out of danger, I stayed away. I was protecting you, Xiaojia." "You could have told me. Do you know how hard it was to find you?" she snapped. "No." Gaywani's voice was flat. "He's an unimaginable supreme being. Even mentioning his name, writing it down, or transmitting information about him could alert him." Zatanna fell quiet, intimidated, until Gao Li patted her shoulder and steadied her. "I don't know which unspeakable Loki you mean," he said, "but whatever you're planning, don't do it here in Gotham. This is my city. People I care about live here. I won't let some world-shattering war happen on my streets." Gaywani opened his mouth to reassure him, then fixed on the hand on Zatanna's shoulder. "Wayne's kid, when you face the great elders of the magic world, show a little respect, and take your hand off Xiaojia's shoulder." Gao Li's eyes narrowed as the endless ring stirred. "Gao Li, don't." Zatanna gripped his hand and pleaded. She didn't want a fight between her friend and her father. Her gesture sent Gaywani's temper flaring. He'd been looking for any excuse to put the boy in his place. "Xiaojia, don't stop me. Today I'll teach this junior a lesson." Dr. Fate and Master Ochi exchanged weary glances. Moke and Boston looked bored. Between true magic masters and an ordinary magician, there was no contest. The only mystery was Gao Li's earlier trick. He'd broken a barrier quietly, suggesting some cunning method rather than raw force. That didn't clear up what his real combat strength was. Outside, the two squared off in the open. Gaywani introduced himself with proper ceremony. He was no braggart, even when scolding a youngster. Gaywani John Zatara, descendant of Leonardo da Vinci, master of reverse magic. Gao Li answered in kind. Apprentice of Shotaro Ishinomori, night magic. Gao Li Wayne. The assembled magic masters were taken aback. Shotaro Ishinomori? Night magic? Obscure names, unfamiliar schools. No one in the room recognized them. Gaywani's expression hardened. "Be careful, kid." Before he could move, Gao Li unbuckled his belt. A strange, humming chant began, an automatic voice from somewhere on his belt. "Shabadubi touch henshin, Shabadubi touch henshin." Gaywani gaped. Before he could process it, Gao Li slipped a magician's ring onto his finger. A crimson magic circle bloomed in the air. "Transform!" Intense magical energy erupted. Armor formed over Gao Li in a blaze of crimson and gold. The magic masters stared. They had never seen this kind of magic before. Master Ochi murmured, "So that's it." The opening song was a spell chant. He understood. At the wizard driver's development stage, Gao Li had found the standby chant annoying. Researching further, he discovered it couldn't be removed. That standby sound was the prerequisite incantation for night magic. You could cast ordinary spells without it, but to trigger transformation magic, you had to chant it. Gao Li's driver sang it automatically to avoid having to perform it himself. "Is he a magic warrior like Shazam?" Gaywani guessed, growing serious. Shazam's power was legendary and could not be dismissed. A repulsive force blasted outward. Gaywani had judged right. A magic warrior would rely on speed to close in and then deliver devastating strikes. Gao Li lunged, but a repelling wave slammed into him, his legs carving 2 furrows in the earth. "It's definitely a magic warrior," Gaywani said, satisfied. A normal person would have been thrown aside, but its intensity is limited, nothing like the real Shazam. Gao Li's ring glowed cyan. "Storm, please." A fierce wind rose from behind him and tore the ice blades Gaywani had summoned into shreds, ripping the grass and leaving pale scars in its wake. Then a crimson circle flared at his side. "Fire, please," Gao Li intoned. The storm fed the fire, and the flames surged into a fiery maelstrom that rushed at Gaywani. He frowned in surprise. "So fast." Quickly, Gaywani chanted without a tremor. "Ocean descend." Gigantic waves rose from the horizon, colliding with the firestorm. Steam hissed and exploded in a roar as water and flame met. Not good. Section 20. Several magic masters watching the battle moved at once, and a barrier rose from the ground in front of the wooden house to protect it from any stray damage. Gaoli and Gaewani had already exchanged several rounds of blows. Fire, water, ice, and lightning braided through the air in a spectacular display. Their magic didn't just target each other. It tore up the environment. The forest ignited, the valley froze, and the grassland was shred. "This Wayne kid isn't ordinary," Dr. Kent, Master Ochi, said in amazement. "His casting speed is absurdly fast." "Honestly," Master Ochi agreed, "of the magic masters I've seen, his speed would rank in the top 5. Ochi rarely encountered a caster who could rival reverse magic, which was already one of the simplest, fastest systems. It seems his teacher, Shotaro Ishinomori, is powerful. He refined the spells into a name plus please structure. That's extremely difficult. Strange, I've never heard of him." Moke, who had the broadest knowledge among them, looked troubled. In all his years, he ought to have heard of such a master. "Maybe he's low-key," Boston offered. "Or maybe the Wayne family is loud, but the man behind it isn't as famous as you'd expect. Either way, he's already at a disadvantage." Kent nodded. "Yes, no matter how simplified his magic is, it can't match the raw speed of reverse magic. He still needs rings to activate and the extra please incantation." What Dr. Kent suspected, Gaewani, also a magic master, saw clearly too, and relief and pleasure washed over him. "No way, he's trying to fight reverse magic with that kind of casting speed? Didn't you learn our family's secret arts from Xiaojia?" "It's just youth and arrogance," someone sneered. "Thinking unique shortcuts let you challenge the peaks. Good for him to learn early." Between attacks, Gaewani had time to mock, but Gaoli only shook his head and sighed. "I tried to give you face and duel you like an ordinary magic master, but you repay me with contempt." As he spoke, Gaoli slid 2 more rings onto his fingers. "Fine, I'm done pretending. Who said I could only cast 1 spell at a time?" "Eh?" Gaewani blinked. Then 3 different colored magic circles overlapped around Gaoli almost at once. "Magma, please. Thunder, please. Defend, please." The 3 incantations hit almost simultaneously. The flame barrier canceled Gaewani's attack, and then an elemental onslaught followed. The earth split and spewed molten magma while lightning bolts rained down, pincering from above and below. Multiple chants! Gaewani's pupils constricted. He scrambled to cast reverse magic, but the earth-shattering force still overwhelmed him. The magic masters watching froze. This Gaoli Wayne, fighting a seasoned master, had been hiding his true strength? The move was brilliant. Anyone on the field would have been caught off guard. He can cast spells simultaneously? Could his magic be? Master Ochi stared at the belt on Gaoli's waist. A black palm marked it, the probable core of his magic, like a staff. Dr. Kent's expression shifted. If that palm symbol has a special conceptual meaning, he might be able to cast more than 3 spells at once. In ritual magic, special objects often carry decisive constitutive meaning. Gaoli's system combined a palm symbol and rings, so by common magical logic, it was quite likely the number of spells he could cast matched the number of fingers on that palm. As their suspicion ripened into confirmation, Gaoli, bolstered by study and the authority granted by the Lord of Magic, had reached the pinnacle of night magic cultivation. Not only was his magic powerful, the number of simultaneous spells he could cast matched his palm's full capacity. With a casual sweep of his left hand, his right hand became laden with 5 rings as if by instinct. "I'll show you my 5 elements grand barrage once more," he said. Gaewani, coughing and covered in dust, emerged from the smoke. He had barely defended himself and was secretly relieved he hadn't lost face when he saw 5 layers of magic circles already enveloped the battlefield. "Metal, please. Wood, please. Water, please. Fire, please. Earth, please." Gaewani's face drained. The 5 elements spun through their mutual generative cycle, combining into a devastating storm that filled 100 meters of space. The roar of the assault shook the world. Even the wooden house inside the barrier trembled. "He can cast 5 spells at once. That's outrageous," someone breathed. Gaewani flickered and teleported away to the side of the watching magic masters. Even for him, reverse magic's chief strengths, freedom and casting speed, would struggle to counter a full 5 elements barrage head-on. He could still evade. Spatial displacement was one of reverse magic's trump cards. "Heh heh, taste defeat now?" Master Ochi taunted. How does it feel to lose to a junior? Gaiwani's expression soured. He ignored Ochi's jibe and replied through clenched teeth. This only shows there's always someone better. There really are magics faster than reverse magic. Eye-opener. Dr. Kent seized the chance to needle them as well. If the measure was the casting speed of a single spell, night magic, reliant on rings and a post-placed please, was inferior to reverse. But Gowli could stack many spells at once. In the time reverse magic took to produce one effect, Gowli had already stacked 5. Humph, Gaiwani scoffed, sweating from exertion. He just stacks quantity and calls it skill. It lacks finesse. He needed to save face in front of his daughter. My spatial movement is more advanced than his night magic. If his attacks can't hit, they're meaningless. Zatanna stood beside him, biting her lip, hesitant to speak. The 5 elements barrage ebbed, leaving a huge deep pit around Gowli, but Gowli himself was unharmed. Oh, Boston said slowly. So that's what his magic warrior transformation does. The defense alone lets him cast freely without worrying about friendly fire. Reverse magic can also produce ultra-powerful attacks, but you must worry about not harming yourself. Night magic can plow through everything around it without restraint. Gaiwani's face darkened. Whose side are you on? Why are you making him look good? Whatever, Gaiwani snapped. I have spatial magic. What does being affected mean to me? He wouldn't give his old friends any more ammunition, so he activated his power and reappeared on the battlefield. Kid, you're decent, but you still can't touch a single hair on me. That's the gap in experience and realm. Gowli was momentarily speechless. You didn't touch a single hair on me either. Ah, yes, if you say so. I'm tired of sparring. Let's go to the finale. He slipped a few rings into place and suddenly raised his Magic Master sword gun and fired. It was a new technique he'd never used before. Gaiwani, wary after seeing Gowli's hidden strength, chose not to face it head-on. Go behind him, he warned. Gaiwani vanished, and Gowli activated his perception with the Lord of Magic's precision, catching the spatial fluctuation. 2 large magic circles overlapped. Connect, please, Gowli intoned. Night link, please. Night kick, please. Flames flared on Gowli's boots as he backflipped and launched a kick into the linking circle. Gaiwani had just finished his spatial shift when another linking circle opened before him. Ooh! Gaiwani stammered, but it was too late. Gowli's night kick crossed the void. Scorching fire brushed past him and slammed into the ground behind him, sending up a plume of smoke. The explosion hurled him through the air. He rolled and finally collapsed some distance away, blinking painfully. Gowli calmly removed a ring and dispelled his transformation. Gaiwani struggled to his feet, grinding his teeth. You bastard, did you try to kill me? What would make you say that? Gowli spread his hands innocently. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be ashes I could sprinkle in someone's face. You. Gaiwani's veins throbbed as violent magic flared around him. Zatanna rushed forward and grabbed him. Master, don't fight anymore. Let go. I haven't even used half my power yet, Gaiwani growled. Losing in front of his daughter had stripped him of pride and made him furious. I held back because I thought this wasn't a life or death duel. I wanted to teach a junior a lesson. But this kid... Master. Zatanna lowered her voice and spoke earnestly. Gowli held back out of consideration for me. Otherwise... Her expression turned serious. She'd seen what Gowli could really do and had kept his secret. She could only whisper. Otherwise, his true magic power is more than 10 times what you just felt. 10 times? 10? Gaiwani's struggles eased as he looked at Zatanna's sincere face. He slowly opened his mouth. Chapter 31. This grandpa is going to throw some ash in your eyes after the fight. Gowli realized he'd underestimated night magic, or rather, he'd underestimated the form of night magic he himself cast. Against other night magic masters, even transforming into a magic warrior in basic form would struggle to match reverse magic's flexibility and speed. Against a master like Gaiwani, perhaps even against Zatanna, he would likely need to use an enhanced form to win. Gowli was different. He was the developer of night magic. His knowledge and cultivation had reached the system's peak. He was also its master, wielding the authority of night magic like a natural limb. With both the depth of his study and the Lord of Magic's blessing, the power behind his spells was several times that of an ordinary night magic master. Chapter 32. Ultimate Darkness. giant ferocious beast,